Settle down, everyone. Settle down. Quiet down. Take your seats. Take your seats. I know we're all very excited to learn today. Welcome. I am Preceptor Jackivus Mimicous, and you are taking the Children of Champions course, located here in the debate parlor. Don't mind the red wolf hair under the desk or any of the human bones. This room was occupied by someone else previously, and they have since vacated the premises, as it were. So I just want to welcome all of my scholars and students here. I know that it's been tough being locked inside of the Raya Lucaria Academy, but fear not. I will teach you the entire history of not just this academy, but of the Carian Royal Family and how we are stuck in this place that we are today. I will be teaching you the histories and affairs of the lands between. We will learn about the entire history of Caria, from their ancestry to Rennala's ascendancy to queen. We will go over the Liurnia Wars and the downfall of Caria, as well as the Shattering and the present day. Bear with me, I'm coming over just a little cold right now. Even wizards can get sick. If you notice any flickers or glamour, if you were, during this lecture, it's only because I'm an astral projection. I'm not here with you right now. And this kind of place is kind of shabby, isn't it? Why don't we, that looks nice, or what about, oh, that's nice too. Don't be alarmed if it looks like you are not in the debate parlor anymore. Through the means of lunar magic, I can make it appear as if we were anywhere or any time within the world. I find that this is a easier way to teach you what's going out there by essentially bringing you there. But why should you trust me? Well, I am a royal preceptor of history and lore. I was very close to the Carian Royal Family. I was actually a Carian knight in my youth. I may not look it, but, I'm rather old. There are a few silver hairs up there. I was very close with the family. I was close with Rennala. I was close with Radagon when he was here at the academy. And I was there when all 4 of her children were raised. I've studied under the great scholars such as Hidetaka Miyazaki or Kentaro Miura and the great George R. R. Martin. I'm very familiar with these worldly works and understand the inner workings of the earthly and the divine. As someone who was close with King Consort Radagon before he ascended the throne, I got to know a little bit about him. And when he left, he founded Golden Order fundamentalism, and 2 of their main laws in Golden Order fundamentalism is the law of causality, the pull between meanings, and the law of regression, that all things yearn eternally to converge. Now, I'm not a Golden Order fundamentalist myself, but I do respect the advancements that they've put forth in mathematics, science, religion, just our complete understanding of the world. So I use their methods in a way to understand what goes on out there. We can't be everywhere at once, but with a little bit of digging, we can figure it all out. I'm also a very good friend with the Black Swordsman. You may have read one of my other novels. The one on the Eclipse seems to be a very popular one with the students. So, it's a little dramatized, but the things that he tells me and sends back to here at the Academy for me to research, I like to fancy it up a bit to make learning a little more fun. With that said, let's jump straight into the history. Now, before we could talk about the Carians, we have to go back, way back, to some of the first people who could have been in the lands between. The Numens, the Eternals. Now, God Queen Marika is a Numen herself. Her title is the Eternal, but that's kind of like a play on words. It's not just that she's the queen forever, it's also that she is a Numen. Numens are denizens of another world. They are not from the lands between, and I hypothesize that of another world means not just another continent, but maybe another interstellar planetary system. They're also long-lived and seldom born. These are ancient people. To us, they may seem like gods. We don't know how long Queen Marika has been alive. There's no recorded date of her birth, or rather, any queen before her. So it's very tough to say how old the Eternals can be. But we know there's very few of them. They were also builders of great wonders. You may have seen some research scholars or any of the scrolls that have been left around about the eternal cities deep underground. Those are magnificent cities that, I bet you wish you could... Oh, there they are right now. As I was saying, they're very beautiful cities with expert craftsmanship, the type of craftsmanship that hasn't been capable of by, regular humans in the lands between for who knows how long. Most of our architecture is a little more Norman, if you will. And something about the Numen is that we don't know if there was other factions in them. They're not a monolith. No group is a monolith. There's always people who want different things within any same group or, ethnicity or culture. So just going in, just remember that we don't know everything about them. Excuse me, I need a sip of water. We're trying to do this all in one go, so if there's any hiccups, please bear with them. We're here for the knowledge and the information, not for some fanciful magic tricks. The Eternals were people who were interested in the Celestial. We know that they collected starlight shards. These were passing flashes of light. And we know that they used them in prized, intoxicating droughts. They would take these flashes of starlight and, through some sort of magic, be able to concoct potions of some sort. Some people hypothesize that one of those droughts was celestial dew. It's also known as a hidden night tear. You may have seen some of the bottles lying around the academy before. It's almost a recollection of a time when the stars of the night sky were what guided fate. More on that later. So we know that the Numens, or the Eternals at least, their culture had an interest in the stars up above. We also know that the Eternal culture had something to do with moon interest. There is this moon of Noxtella. It's a lost black moon, and it was said to have guided the countless stars. A question that we have at the Academy is that, were there two moons? Why is this one lost? What happened to it? Maybe it's a spaceship. Some of the crazier scholars say that maybe this lost black moon was actually a spaceship, and that's how the Numens came from another world. But, it's lost. We'll never know what it was. This pendant that we have, this was given to me by the Black Swordsman. It's very interesting. So it shows this black face of a white black moon, and it has these blue Carian glintstones around them. They look like Carian blue. They may be regular blue glintstones, but it's hard to tell. One thing you should know about me, about your Preceptor Jackivus Mimicous, is that I am colorblind. So if I make a mistake with color, it's due to that. Glintstone magic has not helped me see color yet, so oh well. Also, on top of this pendant, looks like two birds. Some people hypothesize that this may be a cuckoo. The cuckoo is a bird who would steal the eggs out of a competing cuckoo's nest and then put their own eggs inside. It was a way to get someone else to raise their children. If you've read any of the tarnished writer Shakespeare, you might have heard of the term cuckoldry, which comes from the cuckoo bird. This black moon was also found. We have these black, lightly beguiling stones that are said to be fragments of this lost black moon. It's very smooth, doesn't reflect. You may have seen them. Actually, student, if you could, go into your pocket and take out your small black device. It has what looks like a black mirror until you press maybe something on the side or show your face, and then it lights up. The Black Moon Sorcerer Stones are similar in that nature. They allow a sorcerer to increase their memory and increase their mind, and I could imagine that the thing that you're holding in your hand right now is quite the same. This is where some scholars get the idea that maybe the Lost Black Moon was some type of interstellar spaceship because of the similarity of this black beguiling stone appearing like these small glintstone powered devices that many of you students have. And if you heard that sound, that is my familiar, Luna. She is a black cat and she yells frequently. So if you hear her, that's just her saying, hello, hi, pay attention to me, but we can't because we're learning. Another thing about the Eternals is the connection to Empyreans and Wolves. Now, it's not within the class's entire scope, but from what we can gather so far is that Empyreans appear to all be Numen. We know that Marika is an Empyrean because she is the God Queen, and her children, all the Numens that all the Empyreans that we're aware of seem to be her children. There is there's my cat again. Do not worry, she is okay. She takes medication for whatever problem is that she has. It's not a joke. She's fine. Just, I can't stop her. We know that there was the Glom-eyed Queen, and we're not sure if she was Numen, but we know she was an Empyrean. So she is an outlier that we're not aware of, but it seems we can deduce that all Empyreans are Numen. We also know that there's a connection between wolves and Empyreans, that wolves were the shadows of Empyreans. And there's this ancient history of Empyreans having wolves. You'll see a lot of ancient iconography and items that... Oh, I'm flickering out to see what's going on with the cat. Woo! I have returned from the beyond. My familiar has been taken care of. She is calm and she is relaxed. As I was saying, there is an ancient history tying Empyreans and wolves, so there seems to be some sort of bestial relationship within Numen culture where it pertains to Empyreans. We don't know how large of an influence that is. The Numens were also creators of not just great cities, but great inventions. Their cities include Nokron, which is found in the southern edge of the lands between, beneath the lands of Caelid and Limgrave. There's also the great city of Nokstella, which is beneath Liurnia. You may have, most of our artifacts that we have retrieved are from Nokstella. And there's also the unnamed and destroyed Eternal City. It's beneath Leyndell. We don't know how it was destroyed, but there are some theories. We'll get to that. There's also some hypothesis that the Numens may have had a holding within the consecrated snowfield. Now, some of their architecture is there, but not their classic Nokronian, Nokstellian design, but the type of design you might see within the lower quarters of Leyndell. So it's hard to say if they had a city up there, but we have evidence that I will present further why we believe that. The Numens also created something quite spectacular. It's called the Silver Tear. It's this liquid moldable metal thing that can essentially turn into anything. One of their weapons, this flowing Nox sword, it's thoroughly tempered until hardened, and it can shoot out like a whip. There's this legend of the blind swordsman, and how a fairy granted him a fighting style by showing him her flowing weapon, or I don't think it's gendered, their flowing weapon. So, some people believe it's this Numen, Noxian, eternal weapon that this legend is based off of. They were also able to make plants. You may have seen silver fireflies, or animals like silver fireflies, or plants like the melted mushrooms. So this silver tear is quite moldable. But could it create something more? We know that the Numens attempted to make giants, dragons, and people. there's these larval tears. They're the core of creatures of mimicry. This is what a silver tear is. At its center, this unbeating heart. Throughout the lands between, you may have encountered a bear or a man, and when they died, turned into another monster like a lobster or a troll. And upon their death, a larval tear would be found on them, thus proving that that was a creature of mimicry. They've also attempted to create dragonkin soldiers. Now, these were born underground, and they knew no true sky and no true lightning, so ice lightning was their weapon. It's believed that the gravelstone scale is what gives ancient dragons their immortality. And since the dragonkin soldiers never attained those stone scales, they never became immortal. They were these decrepit, pale imitations of their skyborn kin. Perhaps they were trying to make an army, or a dragon lord. We have no way of knowing. Now, students, if you're going to say, some of these things that you've told me before, you said the Numens did this, but, I thought it was the Nox. Well, so the Nox are sort of the legacy of the Eternals. The Numen are long-lived and seldom born. We don't know how they reproduce or how often they reproduce, but we know there's not many of them. So it seems that with their creations of being able to make food and weapons and these great cities, that they also attempted to create people to fill those cities with. Their own denizens, if you will. Their own, not, I wouldn't say servants, but, just their own creations. If you've seen a silver tear husk, that can be molded in some way, almost like with human hands, into its own life. So you may hear some of the other scholars sneer and laugh and say that it makes a mockery of life to be reborn again and again into imitation, but I say this to them. They walk around with these glintstone crowns on their heads that look like the creators of whatever school they're part of, and I think that mimicry mocks life. So to them I say, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I feel very strongly when it comes to mimicry. Anyway, there is this supposed birthing drop ritual that these man-made life forms are created by a primordial drop of dew, and that the ripples are thought to be the origin of their life. You may have seen this with the Albinaurics who bleed silver. They seem to have some connection to the Nox in some way because of their silver blood. So we in my scholarly circles at least, believe that the way that Albinaurics are born is similar to how the Nox were initially created. We don't know what this primordial drop of dew is, but we assume that it is the celestial dew, the hidden night tier, and that it is created with the starlight shards that were used for intoxicating droughts. So if we go all the way back, it seems that beings of silver are beings of the stars. It's quite interesting. Now, where does that get us? That gets us to the Nox, mimics made man. So we've went over how Albinaurics are treated like life forms. They're made by human hands and they're reviled. But, the same could be said to the silver tears that turn into human forms. Mimic tears can mimic the form of a giant, of a lobster, or of a person. I've seen it with my own eyes, of a silver globulate taking the form of a man. Now, mimicry does not extend to imitating the will of the summoner or the subject. It just takes on the form. This reminds me of how many of us look like our parents. Now, many people say I look like my father. And while I have some of his attributes and, some of his characteristics, not just physically, but out of personality, no one could say that we're one for one the same person. No one could say that we have the same will as each other. In attempting to possibly create a lord, it seems that a new race of people was created, a cold-blooded race, and they would develop their own society. Now, we call these people the Nox, and they have their own Noxian culture. It's assumed a shared culture to the Numen. That's why previously, if some of the things I was explaining to you, if you believe, well, hold on, that's not Numen, that's Nox. Well, that's because most of our research into the Numen comes from what we know about the Nox. So it's very difficult for us to be able to separate which group did what, which group invented what. So we try to deduce where in the timeline and the origins of these societies and cultures who did what. Anyway, the Nox are a matriarchal society. They assign their highest ranking clerics to women, their night maidens and their swordstresses. They're a religious society. We don't know exactly what they worship. We believe that it's the sun, the moon, and the stars, but we don't know if there's a specific deity or god associated with that. Sorry, I need my wizard juice. The high-ranking clerical women would hide their eyes with a soft silk. Unsure of why they might do this, we know that they mostly are living underground, so it may be, as a way to save their eyes from having to look at a false night, but we don't know why they avert their eyes. We do know that in religions up above, particularly those who follow Marika and maybe Radagon, that eye seals are important. And there are the finger readers who are eyeless, so maybe too much devotion to a god plucks out your eyes, and they are mimicking that blindness in faith in their own special way. I guess it could be that because true faith would have you blind yourself permanently, therefore you could never see the truth. Okay, that's kind of poetic. But if you blindfold yourself or cover your eyes with soft silk, you have faith, but you will also use your intelligence to say, maybe my faith is not in the right direction, so let me open up an eye and try and see. They were also celestial interested, maybe more than the Numen. We know that they live under a false night sky, that they have celestial dew, that they may have collected starlight shards, and that they do worship the lost moon of Noxtella. We don't know if they're more or less celestially interested than the Numen, but no one can say that they aren't adherents of the stars and the moon. And they were also great creators themselves, if only by imitation. Excuse me. So some of the Noxian creations. The Nox would use spirit manipulation to create puppets. They cultivated gloveworts underground, or ghostworts that have these little spirits attracted to the plant. A puppet is when you take a person's soul and you enslave it for eternity. The flesh is temporary. One day, your flesh should rot and perish, but your soul should be able to live on in the ether for all time. So becoming a puppet was either the reward for a heinous crime. There's my familiar again. There's nothing I could do about it except fade away. I'm sorry for the interruptions, everyone. It's very difficult to teach such a class like this with an academy in ruins, and, the familiars need to be taken care of, so I apologize. As I was saying, a heinous crime would be the reward, or puppet being enslaved as a puppet would be your reward for a heinous crime. But some high-ranking clergywomen would choose to become a puppet of their own volition, a servitude to a higher cause. As I mentioned previously, the Numen had mimic tiers. Possibly they were trying to craft a lord, but it seems more likely than not that the Nox were trying to use mimic tiers to create a lord of their own, to craft one, if you will. We also know that there was a crime committed by the Nox, that they created this Finger Slayer blade, and it was born of a corpse, and it was proof of their high treason. We know that it can harm the Greater Will and its vassals, but we don't know whose corpse it came from. We have reasons to believe that weapons like this are born from the corpses of a god, but is it just a god, or is it a Numen, or is it specifically an Empyrean? So we don't know, but we know that the Nox created this weapon, and it seems that a body had to have perished for this weapon to be made, so who was it that died in order to make this weapon? We also don't know if it's just a Nox crime. There may have been Numen involved, or another faction, but for what we know, it is just the Nox, but there may have been other people or groups involved with this crime. This crime invoked the ire of the Greater Will. Now, we don't know if that is the Greater Will directly, the big man in the sky, or if it's one of his vassals, or maybe a kingdom under his control, its control. Sorry, I don't mean to gender some, nebulous concepts such as gods. But we know that the ire of the Greater Will was invoked, and the Nox were banished to live underground under a false night sky. They would use some, probably silver tears, to create the scattering of stardust so it would never feel like they left home. It's very sad. Now, this is where we get to the downfall of the Eternal Cities. Now, when I say the downfall of the Eternal Cities, I don't know if it was when the Numen were present or if it was when the Nox were present. My assumption, based on the information that we have, is that it was when the Numen were present in these Eternal Cities, and this was their downfall. One of the stories talks of eternal darkness, the despair that brought about the ruin made manifest of the Eternals. It looks like a black hole that no light could escape from, and if you were to cast a sorcery in its direction, it would just get sucked right in and disappear. The eternal darkness almost looks like if you've ever seen a meteorite summoned by an Onyx Lord. Onyx Lords were risen to life when a golden-hued meteor impacted the Earth, and they are able to manipulate gravitational forces. They were these the stone-skinned lords. And they were called lords because of the reverential fear of their destructive power. So it seems that the eternal darkness that took the Eternal Cities may have been summoned by this gold-skinned Onyx Lord, summoning meteorites. Now we know that stars and meteors can carry life. You may have heard of the Astel, the stars of darkness, which was a malformed star born in the flightless void very far away, and it destroyed an eternal city and took away their night sky. That's where the name Stars of Darkness comes from. A falling star is ill omen, and seeing one is supposed to tell you, great trouble is on its way. And we don't know where this eternal city was. Some say it was in the deep root depths. Some say it's in the consecrated snowfield, because that is where the Black Swordsman research has told us that the Stars of Darkness itself are in the consecrated snowfield. So some people believe that maybe the stars being taken away and the destruction of this eternal city was the invoking of this snowstorm that you would find in the consecrated snowfield, or it was the Astel Stars of Darkness landing on whatever society was there, the Eternal City, if you will. But the legacy of the Eternals would live on. Although destroyed, although the Nox invoked ire, they would live on. The descendants of the Nox would breed with humans or like humans. We're not sure if it's that the silver-tiered Nox would start procreating as you would normally expect two humanoids to, or if it's that they started procreating with humans like you or myself. That's where the Nightfolk originate from. They are a Nox-human hybrid. It's said that they bled silver long ago. And we know thanks to the Black Swordsman finding a Urumu. I can't. Oh boy, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that one. I don't speak Nightfolk. It's a sword whip, a Nightfolk weapon. It was found within the Caria Manor, and it's similar to the Nox flowing weapons. It can point out just like a sword. So, thanks to this discovery, we can almost firmly tie the Carian's lineage back to the Nox and the Numen. So let's just do a little recap. But before we do, I need a sip of water. The Numen come from another world, and they're long-lived and seldom born. They're celestially influenced culture, they worship the moon and the stars. The Numens can be Empyreans, all Empyreans may be Numen, and they have a connection to wolves. They created silver life forms and technology, the Mimics, the Nox, the flowing swords. But at one point, their societies were destroyed. The Nox continue that legacy and culture, but the Nox committed a high treason against the greater will. And eventually, they would interbreed with humans, and the Nightfolk would be the descendants of the Nox. So where does that get us? Well, the Astrologers. So in a time before the Erd Tree, before this massive glowing tree took up the skyline, the Nox, or the Nightfolk, a group of them at least, migrated north. They established themselves in the mountaintops so they could nearly touch the sky, and they used these large telescopes to gaze at the stars. They believed that fate was writ in the night sky, so when the sun would go down and the moon would come up, they would get their telescopes and they would just stare into the sky and they would try and find the truth amongst the stars. Some stray glintstone would come from the sky, and they would fashion these into stabs to try and, do great, at the time it was mostly just parlor tricks. Maybe move a stone here or there or flip a cup, but, nothing as extravagant as we have today. We also found that they have ancient shields that, with these scriptures on them that are holy resistant scriptures. So it seemed that at the time, these astrologers in the mountaintops were no friends to any Erd Tree aligned or wholly aligned faction or group. But they were friendly neighbors to the giants, the fire giants. Now, before anyone lived on the mountaintops, there were these ice dragons. They were the lords of the mountain. They were almost ice incarnate, and they made the mountains inhospitable. Not only could they blow this freezing breath of ice, but anytime they shook their wings or their legs, ice would fall from them. The fire giants defeated them and chased them away from the mountains. You may have heard of Borealis. He's believed to be the last ice dragon that flies on the mountaintops. But the fire giants, although they drove away the ice dragons, the fire giants made living on the mountaintops hospitable. With their flames, they could melt the snow, and with their presence, they could protect life within the mountains. But who were the fire giants? Well, today, they would be seen practically as gods. All of them had flame red hair and worshipped this fearsome one-eyed god. It's said that they are descendants of whoever created blacksmithing. So this is a group of a race of beings that were focused on creating. Although they are fire giants and fire can be a destructive a destructive force, you could use fire in a way to create things, to maybe tear down the old to build the new. It doesn't have to be malignant, malign, or malevolent. Fire can be used for good. We know from their prayers, the Burn O Flame incantation, that the fire giants have a solitary curse, that they are to serve as keepers of the flame for eternity. Now, that may be the face of their god that's fused into their chest, or maybe that's the forge of the giants, but to them it's a curse, and I could see it as a curse. It's a responsibility to make sure that this flame is never used for ill intention, that it's always used for good, so they must watch it closely, and that could seem like a curse. So we have the astrologers on the mountaintops, and we have the fire giants and their friendly neighbors, and they're just using their telescopes and looking at the stars. But one of those astrologers glimpsed into what is known as the primeval current. And when he glimpsed into the primeval current, the stars amber rained upon him. And this was the founding of Glintstone sorcery, the founding reign of stars. So Glintstone sorcery that you and I use almost daily was founded by looking into the primeval current. We have another group of astrologers, though, in the mountains, and they are the Full Moon Cult. It was founded by a female stargazer. So she was an astrologer herself, but instead of sticking with the astrologers who were dabbling into the primeval current and trying to learn about the stars amber, she would just watch the stars from her telescope until one day she met the full moon. This would be the start of the matriarchal Carian clan that you're very, very familiar with today. And, eventually one of them would establish their Carians as a recognizable royal line. But we'll get back to them. That's for later. Before we can talk about the Primeval Sorcerers, we have to know what is Glintstone. Well, Glintstone is described as the amber of the cosmos. Golden amber contains the remnants of ancient life and houses its vitality, the physical, while Glintstone contains residual life, the spiritual life, and thus that is known as the vitality of the stars. If you remember earlier, we talked about how the Nox or the Silver Tears, the Albinaurics, could have been created with celestial dew, which could have been created by starlight shards. So it seems that if golden amber is life, then this glintstone, this residual life, the spirit, that maybe these man-made life forms are born of spirits. It's an interesting thought if we try and look through it with regression. So these are essentially, glintstone is essentially space crystals that can store life essence and thoughts. Making a rock think, isn't that crazy? Having a crystal or a rock do computing for you. It's a very wild thought. The founders of Glintstone sorceries were Lusat and Azure. Lusat and Azure. Get my words mixed up. The power of Glintstone and the primeval current seduced them. You may be asking yourself, wait a minute, how can Lusat and Azure be the founders of sorcery? They were only expelled from the academy when Rennala became headmaster. I'll tell you how they could be the founders. Immortality rituals. Now, the old sorcerers on the mountaintops, they would take primal glintstone blades and they would cut into their own hearts so they can imbue their soul with primal glintstone. This would kill the original body, but allow them to live eternally, as long as a young and sturdy broad fellow could be found, and that they could slice open their heart and put the primal glintstone into them. We saw rich and powerful, mostly men, sacrifice the young in the name of science. But what it really was is an addiction to immortality and to power. To fuel this addiction, they needed to move to a location that had more glintstone. Now, while they were on the mountaintops and they were closer to the stars, they were not interested in merely gazing anymore. They wanted to be one with the stars. Sorry, you may have heard a little bird chirp. They wanted to be one with the stars. So, on the mountaintops, there was not a lot of glintstone for them to pool together. However, there was discovered a large deposit of glintstone in Liurnia. Above the Lake of Rot, a massive glintstone meteorite impacted the Earth. So, the primeval sorcerers moved down from the mountaintops into Liurnia, and they developed the society in that area, where we sit today. But a caste system would develop. The Primeval Sorcerers, who were partaking in immortality rituals, they were the richest and most powerful. They had long lives, and for who knows how long before they moved down from the mountaintops. So the weaker and more poor sorcerers were forced to mine the Glintstone instead of really partaking in the intoxicating immortality rituals or the pursuit of science. So a stigma grew around these sorcerers who were forced to mine in these Glintstone tunnels. The effects of Glintstone exposure is quite alarming, to say the least. If you're exposed to too much Glintstone, your organic matter will start turning into crystal. The miners in the mines, they had started solidifying and hardening, their bodies turning to almost full crystal. The fauna in the area as well, the cave moss and the fireflies started turning into crystal. It makes life very difficult when you are a crystal man. So it's not very pleasant. What's ironic is, however, is that the primeval sorcerers attempted to do just the same. They thought they could glimpse past the wisdom of stone into the primeval current by fusing their bodies with glintstone. So, although a caste system developed where the miners in the tunnels were turning into these rock crystal men, these headmasters, these most powerful sorcerers around, were doing just the same. So, it's quite ironic where the stigma and power can lie when essentially you're both doing the same thing. Because of this, a academy and town developed in the area. These immortal sorcerers gained a lot of wealth and power, and they thought that if they founded an academy, if they pooled the knowledge and resources together of people throughout the lands between, they could get further to their goal of truly, seeing into the primeval current. So a town grew, an academy grew. Nobles from the Erd Tree capital would pay large sums of money to learn glintstone sorceries. Those who would be admitted would have to take vows of virtue and austerity, but with extended life, one is apt to forget old vows. We'll get to those old vows in a moment. But those deemed worthy could don a stone crown. Now, there's different schools within the academy, and each school has their own crown associated with it. The Caralos Conspectus was founded by Azur and studies comets. The Olivinius Conspectus was founded by Lusat and studies meteors. The Twin Sage Conspectus was for elites of the academy. They could study whatever they wanted. The Haima Conspectus was sorceries of cannon fire and gavel, so, even though this was a school, the ways of war were still developed here. No matter where learning and learnedness goes, people will always find a way to try and hurt each other. And even a school's politics can get nasty, even on the inside, not just the outside. And then there was the Herodotus scholars. They were nomadic and they studied away from the academy. You may notice that they have less glintstone in their crowns too, and I think that's probably a very smart choice, knowing that what glintstone exposure can do to a person. So let's look at some of the discoveries of the primeval sorcerers. Lusat hailed from the town of Celia and Caelid, which is descendants of the Eternal. It's a town that's above the city of Nokron, and we know that Nox lived there. So his Noxian heritage gave him an innate interest in the stars, and he would develop glintstone stars. And many sorcerers of Celia were attracted by this field of glintstone stars, and they would come to the academy to learn. Eventually, this would lead, far later down the line, to the discovery of the Stars of Ruin. This is when Lusat glimpsed the final moments of a great star cluster, and as it was broken, so was he. So remember, students, the path to ultimate power and knowledge is not the right one. Some things need to stay unknown. Other discoveries we have from Azur's Carlos Conspectus was the comet. That was the greatest spell you could learn in the academy. So many scholars wanted to learn the comet for power and respect. If you could master comet, oh man. There was also the Crystal Cadre sorcerers. Now, they pursued the wisdom of stone. They would go to the Crystallians, these stone-like men, and try to learn from them the wisdom of stone. If you look closely, you could see that some of these Crystal Cadre sorceries looks very similar to the comet. And on Azur's path to discovering his final primeval sorcery, he would use the study of comets and the study of the Crystallians to eventually make Comet Azur. It was bewitching and a fearful abyss, and when he looked into that darkness, the darkness looked back into him, and he was gone. I mean, he's not gone, but, his brain's gone. So let's do a recap of the Primeval Sorcerers. There were a group of astrologers who glimpsed the primeval current. They began performing soul-manipulating rituals where they would cut out the heart and put the soul into primeval glintstone. It gives them immortality, but there's side effects to turning into a crystal. You try and be a crystal for a day and see how you like it. Eventually, they moved to Liurnia because there was a high concentration of glintstone to be mined. A powerful academy and town developed, but there's still more secrets and crimes to uncover for the Primeval Sorcerers. We'll get to that, but we're here because we want to know about the Carians. So, before we can look at the Carians, we have to go way back up to the mountaintops before the age of the Erd Tree, and look at the young female stargazer who met the moon. As I said before, she was an astrologer, but she did not follow the Primeval Sorcerers. She went her own path. Though she chased the stars, she eventually one day met the moon. Now, we don't know if this moon was the lost black moon, or maybe it was the full dark moon. We don't know which moon it was, but she met a moon. If it's the lost black moon, that'd be very interesting. But what she found, no matter what it was cold, it was dark, and was veiled in occult mystery. And perhaps it had its own bewitching powers. So with the departure of the Primeval Sorcerers, a matriarchal clan would develop in the mountaintops. You may be asking yourself, so how do we know that these female moon worshippers up in the mountains were following the dark moon and not the full moon? Well, I know many of you believe that the Carians follow the full moon. I mean, you may have seen Rennala in your youth using full moon sorceries, or you may have been here when she bewitched the academy with her full moon powers, and you say, well, I've seen it with my own two eyes. That is a full moon witch, not a dark moon witch. Well, I've seen many Carian traditions. I've been around, kids, and all of their traditions point to dark moon worship. That ties them to the Nox and the Numen with their lost black moon, as of course they're Nightfolk. So the Nightfolk come from the Nox, who come from the Numen, and they all share this lost black moon. This dark moon could be related to that black moon. It makes sense based on the coloring. We know that Carian princesses are passed down a dark moon ring that depicts a leaden full moon and represents a cold oath. So the daughters are given from their mothers a wedding ring that depicts the dark moon. So I mean, if this is an ancestral wedding ring that's passed down from mother to daughter to mother to daughter to mother to daughter, and it shows the dark moon, well, if it looks like a duck and talks like a duck, it might be a duck. Their spouses, whoever would marry the Carian matriarch, would be gifted a dark moon greatsword. And that was a blade that was made from a cold beam of light. So their wedding ring looks like a dark moon, and their husbands are gifted a sword of the dark moon. It's all looking like dark moon from here, but maybe you need a third one. Well, we know that a dark moon casts no light. And if you've been stuck at the academy, you may have not been able to adventure to the Moonlight Altar, where the Carians would eventually settle. And in the Moonlight Altar, you will notice that the moon that you thought was behind the Erd Tree is actually the dark moon, casting no light. And if you would look towards the Three Sisters, you'd look towards the north, you'll see the full moon revealed. It's beams of light coming from it. So looking up in the sky from the Moonlight Altar, we see two moons. The full moon, which casts its light, being hidden, and the dark moon, suspiciously floating behind the Erd Tree and casting no light. So I think we have pretty firm evidence to say that the Carians are dark moon worshippers. I'm a preceptor and a retired Carian knight, so I have to be right. Right? Up on the mountaintops, the Carians, or the moon cult at the time, they made some allies. One of them was the Sun Realm. We'll explain who the Sun Realm is shortly, but there was a large Sun Realm presence in the mountains. We know this because there's leather shields with fur depicting the golden sun. The fur is there to warm them through the harsh winters. Castle Sol and many Sun Realm soldiers are located in the mountaintops. Sol means sun, and you can find sun insignias engraved on the floor in that castle. And we know that they gifted the Moon Clan a ice rind hatchet, which was a scale of Borealis itself. So there was some sort of connection between the two. We know that when the sun and the moon combine, they create an image of the eclipse. Some believe that this imagery represents an alliance between the two groups. So it, would make sense that the Sun Realm and the Moon Clan would make natural allies. Who was the Sun Realm? Well, the long-fated Sun Realm was the previous ruling power before Horolu's conquest. You may be saying, whoa, wait a minute, buddy. I ain't never heard of no Elden Lords from the Sun Realm before. Where are you getting this? Point to the book that says that. Well, I would love to point to you to the exact piece of text that tells me that the Sun Realm was the previous kingdom. But history is written by the victors, and sadly, many of those books have been burned. So, unfortunately, I cannot point to you a direct piece of evidence that says the Sun Realm was here before Horolu. We can just look. All we can look at is the world around us, and whatever evidence that points us to. So, you'll just have to trust me that before the age of the Erd Tree, the Sun Realm was the leading power within the lands between. They seem to be dragon and storm adjacent, and have a Farum Azula connection. The Black Swordsman has shown me drawings of reliefs in Farum Azula that match those in Castle Sol. And the castles, speaking of Castle Sol, many castles look like Castle Sols that you might find. The Caria Manor, Redmane Castle, the Fortified Manor. They're all of this similar Sun Realm design, as seen on their shields. Painted, or relief in their shields. After the Sun Realm disappeared, faded away, their knights and soldiers were exiled and banished to the fringes. You may have seen them before with their great dragon ornamentations on their armors or their storm powers. Even though they were the enemy, they were still knights, and they were shown a knightly respect, and they were able to live out their time in either penal colonies or as, hired soldiers, or some of them even turned turncoat. You can find, if you've ever visited the royal capital, you can find some of their armor gilded, painted gold to represent their switching of sides, as it were. Later, if you haven't read my book, The Eclipse, I recommend you do. That's very relevant. I would go to Chapter 3 and learn how the Golden Fundamentalists are not Erd Tree worshippers, but Sun worshippers. That's another piece of evidence we have. I can't go into it here, but I will say that if you are curious and you don't believe that Golden Order fundamentalists worship the sun, please refer to my previous work, The Eclipse, Miquella's Secret Crime, specifically Chapter 3. If you want to watch that and come back to this, don't worry, astral projections can be paused and resumed at a later date. So, back to the Moon Clan. The Moon Clan had many allies because they were enemies of the Erd Tree. And many of their allies were enemies of the Erd Tree too. So they made some very long-standing oaths. They made oaths with the Sun Realm. They made oaths with some dragons. They made oaths with some trolls, some giants, and some beasts. We also know that they made oaths with the Royal Revenants and the Wraithcallers. That they have long sworn oaths with the Crystallians and possibly Alabaster Lords. If you've ever visited the Caria Manor on a warm summer's day and walked past through their graveyard garden, you may have noticed a curious Evergaol. Now, you might not know who is in that Evergaol, but I do. It's actually an Onyx Lord, so it leads us to believe that the Carians of the Moon Clan are allied with the Silverstone Skin Alabaster Lords, an enemy to the Golden-Hued Onyx Lords, with their destructive meteorite power. There's also thoughts that they may be allied with even the Zamor. More on them later. So one of the oaths that the Moon Clan or the Carians made was an oath to Crystal. The Carians swore an old concord with the Crystallians. The Crystallians are these inorganic beings that people believe yearn to have new brethren chiseled out of the stone. Excuse me. And sorcerers believe that they hold the wisdom of the stone. But that isn't the case. They are not looking to be chiseled out of stone. This is actually the final form of glintstone exposure. The whole body turns crystal. Their weapons turn crystal. Everything about them crystallizes. Like, that is what happens when you get too much glintstone. And it seems that the Carians and the Crystallians had an oath because they're both enemies of the Primeval Sorcerers. The Primeval Sorcerers are trying to cleave into the Primeval Current. And the Crystallians know what type of danger that could expose the rest of the world. So, they want to put a stop to it. They don't want a world made of crystal. Being crystal themselves isn't good. So they're trying to prevent it. And it seems that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and the Carians and the Crystallians allied. So much so that the Crystallians actually taught the Moon Cult their Crystal Sun spell. It kind of looks like a sun, and they do this pose when you praise the sun and all that, which is pretty interesting. They taught, I believe it's the Magic Downpour spell to the Carians. You might say, hey, Preceptor Jackivus Mimicous, how don't you remember all the spells that you're supposed to know if you're part of the Carian Royal Family as a Preceptor? Well, it's because I'm the Preceptor of History and Lore, and it's okay for us to make mistakes and not get everything right, because history, it is set in stone, but our understanding isn't. I'll leave it at that. This was one of the motivations. Their alliance with the Crystallians is one of the motivations to why they may have descended from the mountaintops onto the Academy. Now we're going to talk about a really, it's a hard thing to talk about, the War of the Giants and the start of the Age of the Erdtree. The War of the Giants. Anyway. In ancient times, the Giants were mortal enemies of the Erdtree. Their roars would desolate nature, and they'd trigger avalanches, and they'd whip up these storms of flames. And for any growing tree, an avalanche or a firestorm would be dangerous to cultivate. So, Horalu, and it seems maybe Marika, strolled up to the mountaintops and attempt to vanquish fire, as it were. Marika, realizing the flames of the forge would never die, marked the giant with a curse, that they may tend to the flame for eternity. Now, it seems already that the giants were already cursed to tend to the flame for an eternity, but, here... You know what, students? I have a question. When did Marika mark the giants with a curse to monitor the forge for all eternity? Was it after Godfrey killed them all? Or before? Marika is the Eternal, after all. She could have cursed the giants long before the Age of the Erdtree. It's just a thought. Even as we teach, we learn. With most of the giants slain, began the Age of the Erd Tree. Now, the Carians and the Astrologers, the Primeval Sorcerers had already left the mountaintops at this time, but the Carians had not. And although they were friends with the giants, they did not interfere at all within the War of the Giants. Some believe it's because of their connection with the Zamor, who are these long-lived warriors, perhaps of Numen lineage, who are devoted to winter and enemies of the fire giants. Now, being devoted to winter might make us think that the connection is through the dark moon and they're long-lived. Maybe these are long-lived Numens who worship the dark moon in its cold, icy loneliness, and that is how we have a Carian Zamor alliance. Whatever the case, the Zamor sided with Horlu's barbarians in the war against the giants, and, they assisted in the near eradication and genocide of, one of the Lands Between's oldest inhabitants. Anyway, as the Erd Tree grew and its light polluted the sky, it became very difficult to stargaze. Thus, the Carians made preparations to move southward. Among the Carians was the Princess Rennala. She followed customary traditions. She learned of the moon. She learned to fear it. She was given the wedding ring from her mother to have her future husband bestow it onto her. And when the Erd Tree finished flourishing and it was taking up the entire sky, she ascended the Carian throne and became the matriarch of their clan. What's interesting about Carian sorceries is that they're all weapons of war. A Carian sorcery is that of sword and spear. The Carians were developing magic not like the Primeval Sorcerers to learn about the Primeval Current or learn about Glintstone, but everything they made was of warlike practices to either defend themselves in case someone was going to try to eliminate them for their beliefs, or possibly to use war to impose their beliefs onto others. But with these sorceries, it allowed a few of the Glintstone Knights, yours truly, to become very formidable. So with the inability to stargaze and many of the allies dead and gone on the mountaintops, a small military force was developed by Rennala. Now, we have some possible motivations to why Rennala moved southward. As a knight, I wasn't told everything. Some things I have to just learn on my own. So I can't tell you exactly why they moved south. But some of them would be maybe because the Erd Tree blocked their ability to see the stars and the moon. Maybe it was because their allies were dead and gone and they were protecting long-sworn oaths that they committed. Or maybe it was because they're trying to enact an age of stars, similar to the Nox. To invoke an order not of gold, but the stars and the moon of the chill night. This might be called the wisdom of the moon. To move into fear, doubt, and loneliness. Now, to me, that doesn't sound too great, but what do I know? It seemed that the Erd Tree, or maybe even the Elden Ring itself, was interfering with the Age of Stars. Now, a very famous line has been said, that a crown is warranted with strength. And Rennala had that in spades. The Carians descended from the mountaintops, and they took an old Sunrealm fort in the northern edge of Liurnia. This would be refashioned into Caria Manor, and new buildings would be erected, but still the base would be a Sunrealm fort. Though she had a small force, about 20 or so Glintstone Knights, no military action was taken. She was able to charm the entire academy with her lunar magic. Now, she kept hidden the Carian Dark Moon connection, because the full and dark moon can dispel sorceries and possibly bewitch. So she was wickedly intelligent. She was smarter than any of those Academy stooges, and was able to just take the table right out from under them. You might say, Preceptor Jackivus Mimicous, you speak very boldly for someone who's stationed inside of the Raya Lucaria Academy. Well, I can speak very boldly because these stoneheads remember the might of Carian retaliation, and they dare not step to me. Anyway, the lunar estates were built, the Moonfolk village was built, and the Church of Manicelis was built. They're very beautiful. They were very beautiful for a time. Now they're fallen to ruin, but back when they were first created, it was beautiful to take a walk from the church to the mansion, the estates, and then see the village. It really was spectacular. There was a lot of different people up there, a lot of great people. So this rise to power led to Caria becoming a recognized royal line. Now, before they descended down to the lands between, they were a matriarchal society. And you would say that they had, a leader. To them, it was a queen. But if you were to ask maybe a nobleman from Landell, they would say, that's no queen. That's just some mountain folk who, put rocks on some twigs and called themselves lord. But to them, they were royalty already. But now that Rennala was able to bewitch the Raya Lucaria Academy and become its headmaster, well, that's a recognized royal line if I've ever saw one. They had, 20 soldiers didn't even have to swing a single sword, and you take over one of the most wealthy academies and towns and all of the lands between. That's royalty. Even if she wasn't wearing a crown before that, she was always a queen. So long live Rennala, the great and beautiful full moon witch. Now that the academy was under new management, with Rennala becoming the headmaster, she started expelling those that were not, she wasn't too keen on. One of them was the two primeval sorcerers, Lusat and Azur, and also Selena, the Graven Witch. Ugh, makes my skin crawl just thinking about her. She was creating Graven schools. It's this practice that originated with the primordial sorcerers when they were astrologers in the mountaintops. They would collect other sorcerers and combine them together into what could be known, I guess, as seeds of the stars. I guess it was a way to combine the bodies and mind so they could be closer to the primeval current. It's very horrifying. It's very disgusting. And I'm very happy Rennala got rid of that horrible practice. Many young lives were lost for the conceit of these immortal fools, as it were. Azur, he went with the nomadic sorcerers to Mount Gelmir. I think they are doing experiments with demi-humans right now. Lusat, he returned home to Celia. He's back home at Celia. I bet he's really nice and cozy now at home in Celia. And Selin, the Graven Witch, well, she went to a farm upstate. She gets to play with other Graven Witches, and they have fun eating seeds of stars all day. And she's good where she is. Don't you worry, kids. She's fine. Although the Carians took over the academy, they bewitched them into their control, and they expelled those who could have seen to foil their plans or had broken long-standing oaths of stone. The Carians needed an insurance plan. One of those is the Lazuli Expectus. They would study Carian sorceries, and they viewed the moon as equal to the stars. I mean, our spells are swords, so that's pretty cool. That's maybe why they joined us. We had knights equipped with magic and holy resistance shields. Now, I don't have my shield on me right now. I'm a retired knight, but they were powerful. I bet if you go upstairs and you talk to my buddy Moongrum, if you get on his bad side, he will parry you into the next dimension. Rennala also extended gifts to the demi-humans. She wanted demi-humans to, she didn't look down on those who were seem as lesser as you would. You know, fools sneered at her, saying, "What are you doing giving a demi-human a staff? They can't cast a sorcery." But, you know, demi-humans are capable of as much intelligence as any human. You know, it's just, it's like a seed. You just have to cultivate it and let it grow. And in time, you know, you will have, you know, someone you could say is as civilized as you. The 4 belfries were also erected, and waygates were established in them. 1 to Stormvale, 1 to Far Missoula, and 1 to Nokron. I wasn't part of the construction, so all I could do is speculate. You know, maybe this is a quick connection to some allies. Stormvale used to be held by the Sun Realm. Far Missoula, I mean, come on. You know what's going on up there. I don't got to tell you why they want to go there. And then Nokron. So it seems that, you know, these might be enemies of the Erd Tree that they have quick ways of communicating and transferring goods to. There's also 2 wells to Noxtella found in Liurnia. 1 at the Moon Altar and another near the Carian Study Hall. I wanted to tell a funny story about the study hall. I don't know if I'm going to talk about the study hall in this lecture, but I don't know if you know, but if you there's this inverted statue, and if you put it in front of the moon at the Carian Study Hall, it'll flip the tower. So me and one of the other preceptors, we sent an astral projection to Preceptor Jackivus, and we told him that we were doing something big at the study hall. So he goes to the study hall, and nobody's there. Nobody's there. He looks like a freaking idiot. And we put the inverted statue into the spot. And while he's the only guy there, he flips upside down and falls straight into the water. It was so funny. He was pissed, obviously, but come on, that dolly botherer. Who cares if he's pissed? What the hell is he gonna do to you? There was also Lacrima, the fairy cat. It said that she lives in the bell tower. So, you know, we like our cats here at Caria. So let's do a little recap. The Cult of the Moon to Carian Royals. There was a group of astrologers led by women who met the moon. They're most likely direct descendants to the Numen or the Nox. They're a matriarchal clan of moon cultists. They have oaths and pacts to the giants, the trolls, the dragons, the beasts, and the crystallians. The Erd Tree's light makes it very difficult to stargaze. They developed wartime sorceries, and a champion among them invaded Liurnia, Rennala. Rennala establishes Caria as a recognized royal line. Now the whole world will see Caria and their queen for who they are, and she expels the Primeval Sorcerers from the academy. All right, students, it's break time. I have a little bit of a cough. I need some water. I'm going to just run to the little wizard's room for a moment, and then we will return to the lesson. I know you're all very excited, so don't go away. We are finally going to talk about the Liurnia Wars. We're going to talk about the Children of Champions, and we're going to talk about the Shattering. So please don't go anywhere. And if you do go somewhere, please come back. All right, I'll be right back. One moment. Hey guys, Jack here. While the preceptor has stepped away, I wanted to announce a new video series I wanted to do. I really like engaging with all of you in the comments, and a lot of you are sharing theories and ideas that I may not necessarily agree with, but someone else might. So, if you want to, please send me an email at jackisamimic@gmail.com with either your theory or a Reddit post or a YouTube video or fan art or whatever. Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Soulsborne, Lords of the Fallen, Lies of P, whatever, something in that universe. And in the coming weeks, I'll be making a new series that is viewer-generated content hosted by me. I think it's a way to kind of get eyeballs on maybe some ideas that you might not see because someone doesn't have a YouTube channel or their Reddit post didn't blow up. I think the Preceptor is going to be back in just a moment. He's got a lot to talk about in the in this back half of this video, so get ready to laugh, get ready to cry, and get ready to learn. All right, see you guys. And I'm back, students. Sorry, on the way to the little wizard's room, there's this waygate that just sends you all the way to the Church of Vows. So I had to, make the trek from there to here. So if anything about me looks different in any way, or if I, make a little mistake and maybe repeat some information, it's just because it was a long walk, especially with the bridges broken, and I don't want to get into it. So last we left off, we just got into almost contemporary history. We looked at the Numens, the Nox, the Astrologers on the mountaintop, and how they split into two groups, the Primeval Sorcerers and the Carian Royals. Rennala comes down from the mountains, she bewitches the Academy, and all seems great. She banishes the Primeval Sorcerers, and, Carians just hanging out in Liurnia. Got the manor, got the estates, got the big church, what more can you want? Something happens, though. The first Liurnia War. Previously, before Rennala bewitched the Academy, the area was, still reigning independently. There was trade and relations between the Academy and nobles, and not really peasantry, but, anyone who could scrounge up enough money to come study at the Academy. So there was, some peaceful and mercantile relationships between Leyndell and the Academy. Without being there in the capital at the time, we can't really know the motivations for why the Erdtree forces would want to invade. One could be that now that there is a new monarch in the area, there might be a threat. This woman from the mountains comes down with 20 knights and takes over this powerful establishment without any militaristic force. That's kind of concerning. The geography of the time may have been different. With the Shattering, we all tend to forget some things. But if the geography was the same, again, my memory is slipping a little. If the geography is the same as it was now, it could be because now that a new monarch controls Liurnia, they lost their path to the fringes and the Stormlands, because Liurnia sits right between the Altus Plateau and Limgrave. So it may be because, we need to get our footholding back in this area so we can march further down there and eliminate the forces down there. One thing that we know about the first during the first Liurnia Wars is that Godfrey was not the lead commander. He was the lord of the battlefield, and he was Marika's. He was the first Elden Lord. Any enemy that was in his wake was absolutely decimated. So the motivations are not very clear to why they would invade. There could have been other motivations, and we'll get to that. So first, let's look at the Champions of Gold. Who did the Erdtree send? Well, it was led by an unknown champion, the red-haired Radagon. He came from what we know, out of nowhere. At the time, no one had ever heard of him. There was no rumors about him. He just seemingly popped out of nowhere. There was, no information about this guy before he invaded Liurnia. The forces were blessed with the sacred Erdtree dew and sap. Before, in the time, none of you could remember this, but the Erdtree used to drip with this, this sacred sap, and it would invigorate the vitality and the intelligence and just the prowess of anyone who partook in such communion. It was very sacred in their religious practices, and it was also used for their military forces. A lot of, most of their soldiers would imbibe on this dew and sap to, make them superhuman. They had a very massive force. There was a lot of soldiers in Leyndell's army, and they were defensively. They fought defensively, large tower shields with spears behind them in order to maintain that even though they were an invading force, they didn't want to lose any soldiers. They were allowed to fight defensively because the power that the Erd Tree granted them meant that they could protect themselves while still also being able to deliver, devastating blows to their opponent. If you've ever seen a knight do a guard counter where they block with their shield and quickly follow up with a heavy attack, well, it comes from the Champions of Gold. That move was designed from their military commanders. They were also blessed with the Golden Vow. This is a long. There's a long tradition of the knights passing this incantation down. They would chant some sort of prayer to honor the Erd Tree, and in return, maybe it was because of the dew or the sap, or just because of their devotion to the tree, it would enhance their methods of initiating violence. It would also make them a little more sturdy. They also were able to cast an incantation known as the Barriers of Gold. Now, this one was specifically designed to protect the user from any type of magic source, which is, if you're going to invade an academy of sorcerers and magic Glintstone knights, then it would make sense why you would want to enshroud yourself in this anti-magic barrier of gold. At the time, this was the strongest army that the world had ever seen. They were able to Landel defeated ancient dragons. Godfrey, when he was Horaloo, annihilated any opposition to his god. For all intents and purposes, no army has been as strong as the Champions of Gold. They may have also used Omen and Misbegotten slave soldiers. Now, I didn't see any personally, but there is rumors that some of their military force was built with slaves, which is it's kind of disgusting. It's one and taking someone's life and dictating what you're making them essentially your puppet, and then throwing them into a war they don't want to fight. It's horrendous. And with everything I listed, their Erd Tree blessing, this massive force, their defensive fighting style, the Golden Vow and the Bearers of Gold, they should have easily defeated the Carians. But hey, come on. We were the champions of Moonlight. We were led by Rennala, the great and beautiful queen of the full moon. And we were enchanted by her lunar magic. We had the Carian sword spells. A Carian knight we could summon 20 blades around us. One knight could be the force of 40 with just a simple spell. An enemy combatant would be coming up from the rear, and these magical swords would just turn around and instantly hit them. We could be 5 men at once. Our blades as well were enchanted with the Carian grandeur. It allowed our straight swords, a one-handed straight sword, to turn into a giant, mighty greatsword, larger than any sword that a normal human, even the Lord of the Battlefield Godfrey, could wield. Just absolutely massive, with such devastating force. It could bring a troll to its knees in one swing. There was, fewer than 20 of us. It was a very intimate group of soldiers, and most of our knights, some of them were troll knights. In the lands between, it's very uncommon to see trolls treated with the dignity and respect as a knight, even as a person. Many use them as slaves, or to dig out their mines, or to pull their coffin carts. But not in Caria. Caria, we show respect to those who to swear their oaths to our queen. It's only right. We're all equal under our queen, Rennala. We also had the Lazuli sorcerers. With our Carian spells, they became as formidable as any knight. They were still wearing their white cloth and their stone crowns, but their swords were old catalyst, wood fashioned into a blade, and they would cast Carian sorceries from the Glintstone swords, and they could take down, a whole group of foot soldiers and their commanders. Maybe difficult if they don't have the skill against a knight, but still with enough power. Lucidity is one of our lunar spells, and it was a way to wash ourselves of the madness of bloody days and long nights of fighting. It's not, I talk about it like it was this glorious occasion, but it never gets easy, having to take someone else's life. Even if you're fighting for something that you believe is just and you believe is right, you're still taking away, the son from a mother, or a husband from a wife, or a father from a child. And, no matter what side you're on, it's never easy. So, we needed to stay lucid through these tough occasions. Even if many of us did not fall, it's still hard to see life snuffed out from anyone. But that may be the case, we would not waver for our queen. And I'm still thankful that the Lord of the Battlefield was not there. Radagon was a great champion and a great commander, but Godfrey, I shudder to think what would happen. We were able to rebuke that first war. It was fairly long. But they could not get through us. No matter how large their force was, 20 knights could fend them all off. A second war was initiated, the Second Liurnia War. But this war was much shorter. There was only a very few small skirmishes, maybe 3 skirmishes. And then the red-haired champion Radagon, he requested a parley. He wanted to meet with Rennala privately. Many of us were warning her that it was a trap. Our queen should not go alone to face the enemy. But, Rennala, she was the smartest out of anyone. She had the moon to guide her, and she said it was right for her to meet with him privately. And after their meeting, the war was announced finished. It would end with a marriage pact. So I guess mission accomplished. In the first Liurnia War, we didn't know why they wanted to invade. They didn't send Godfrey, so it kind of seemed like they weren't interested in crushing the enemy. They let the academy, before it became Raya Lucaria, function in peace. They didn't want any oversight of the academy. So why now? Well, I kind of think, and I can't confirm this, it's just a thought, that maybe the marriage pact was the end goal. That the goal for the entirety of the Liurnia Wars, all those lives lost for the Erdtree side, that is, was so Radagon could wed the Full Moon Queen. We will see a reason why that could be in a few slides. I'm going to reveal some secrets to you students that you may have not heard before. It's very close to the chest, and as a preceptor, I know these things, but I threw away my mask a long time ago, and ain't nobody here going to tell me what I can and can't say. The marriage would start with a vow, and a newly constructed church would be erected, the Church of Vows. It was decorated. Well, it still is decorated, but it's dilapidated now. That old turtle can't really maintain it anymore. It was decorated with statues of Radagon lining the sides, and then a Nox swordstress in the basin of water. Radagon would perform an ancient Noxian cleansing ritual. He would take the celestial dew, and he'd perform a sacrament, and this was a way to wash away his aggressions, to show that he was seeking absolute absolute forgiveness and, absolution. It's very interesting that, Radagon would partake in these ceremonies. This is a Noxian culture is it seems a little foreign to some. It's not really out in the forefront. I mean, they are underground. They gain the ire of the greater will, yet we have this champion of gold coming from the capital who is partaking in rituals that are part of a culture that his god should absolutely disdain. Yet he did. Rennala would give him her mother's wedding ring so he could bestow it on her finger. This was symbolizing the cold oath, not just between Rennala and the Dark Moon, but Radagon to Rennala. Him giving this ring to her was showing that he also would be part of whatever oaths they had to each other and to this cold, dark, occult moon. In return, this long-standing tradition, he would be rewarded with his own gift from the Dark Moon, a Dark Moon greatsword. This was, as I mentioned previously, was a beam of light itself, a cold beam of light itself from the Dark Moon. And as the husband to the Carian matriarch, it would be his weapon. It would also seem that Night and Flame would be married once more. As we know, the Astrologers on the mountaintops were friendly neighbors to the giant. And Radagon had this beautiful flowing red hair, similar to a fire giant, actually. So it would seem poetically that the Astrologers and the giants would marry once more. A full moon crossbow was also built to honor the union. It represents the communion of the moon and the Erd tree. And if you would use holy bolts in it, it would actually show the full power and potential of this crossbow. It's a pretty cool weapon. Only one was made, but it's very cool. The Academy would also send a gift, but they wouldn't send it to the new married couple. The Academy sent this to Leyendell specifically. They sent the Glintstone Chris, and it had an undulating blade that evoked the same shape of the primal glintstone blades used in this immortality rituals. So, usually when you send a knife as a gift, that kind of could seem like a threat. But I'm not sure if it was the Academy threatening Leyendell, or it was the Academy going behind Rennala to threaten, to say, hey, at any moment, if you want us to take out your long-standing enemy, we got daggers. So it's hard to say, but since that knife looks very similar to the primal glintstone blades for the immortality rituals that the Primeval Sorcerers would partake in, I'm leaning towards it wasn't a very, very nice gift. It's kind of dastardly and sly. Oh, before I go further, I want to take a note on some of the Sorcerer Towers. Throughout the lands between, you may have seen these illustrious towers built. Most were built to study the surrounding areas. You build a tower up high, so it's easier to stargaze, easier to look at the area around you. Whatever it is that you want to study. Each of them, or most of them, have a name. These names could be for possible astrologers or sorcerers or royalty. It's hard for us to say. We have the three sisters up by Caria Manor, that one is named after Lunar Princess Rani. One Sullivis renamed to after himself. And then there's one that was named after a peculiar character that we may talk about later. I prepared a map to show you some of the towers we have and who they may be associated with. Now, you remember, not everyone is a monolith, so there are different groups within these things. At Lenny's Rise, down in the Dragon Barrow, there is a graven mass hidden inside, so we believe that this is probably one of the Primeval Sorcerers towers, studying maybe dragons or the farm stuff. The farm architecture and the bestial sanctuary. In Liurnia, there's two very peculiar towers. Now, once Radagon and Rennala wed, two of the towers got converted into churches of America, very small churches of America. Just a very tiny statue of her and her, just to say quaintly, her crucifixion pose. And they seem to be covers. They don't seem to be, legitimate in that remark. Maybe it's to show an allyship with Leyndell. But one of them, the converted tower, we believe is a cuckoo stronghold based on the cuckoo glintstone and magic grease found inside. There is the fringe tower near where the people who are afflicted with the madness illness. That one of our troll knights is guarding, because inside is another graven mass. It's also where I think of Haima Conspectus sorcerer was stationed for a time. And remember, the Haima Conspectus is a conspectus of cannon fire and gavel. They are the judicators and a warlike band of sorcerers used to, quell conflict. So I'm assuming that sorcerer was probably sided with the Primeval Sorcerers. There's also the Mirage Tower found in the Altus Plateau. Now, this tower, you could see it from far away. It's kind of silvery, but once you get up close, it's gone. Well, it's just invisible. I believe that is a Celian stronghold. We'll talk more about the Celians later, but they were a very secretive and very dastardly bunch. So it would make sense that they'd want to keep their eyes on Leyndell without being noticed. Up in the consecrated snowfield, there is the Albinorix Rise, possibly created by Albinorix. But inside is a graven mass. It's disturbing, to say the least. I'm not sure. I can't say for certain why that is. We can only speculate why an Albinorix tower would have a graven mass on the inside. And there's also the Heretics Rise. That is where the founding reign of stars was discovered by the Primeval Sorcerers up in the mountaintops very long ago. So that was just a quick note on the Sorcerer Towers before we move back to congratulating the bride and groom. So we know who Rennala is, but who is this Radagon guy? Who is this unknown champion? Well, I got a secret for you all. Now, you probably haven't heard this anywhere else. Don't tell anybody, but Radagon is America. What? Radagon's America? Yeah, it might seem crazy, but Radagon is literally America. He is the God Queen, the Eternal, the woman with the Elden Ring, America. So, what does that mean? It means that whatever Radagon's doing, it's something that America wants done. He is America. So, that motivation for coming to war with Liurnia is most likely America wanted to make an alliance specifically with Rennala. America wanted an alliance with Rennala specifically. Now, America is a Numen, and as a Numen, she's long lived and seldom born. If we think back to Rennala's ancestry as a Carian, she could be a descendant of either the Nightfolk or just the Nox, and we know that the Nox are descendants of the Numen. So we have a marriage between a Numen man and a Numen descendant woman, Radagon and Marika. That is very interesting. That means that Marika knows about the Dark Moon. Maybe as a Numen, she is aware of the Lost Black Moon. That means Marika as Radagon. Marika is Radagon. Guys, they're the same. Marika is Radagon, okay? So Radagon is Marika, Marika is Radagon. If I say Marika, it could be Radagon. If I say Radagon, it could be Marika. So that means Marika is the one who put the Dark Moon ring on Rennala's finger. That means that Rennala gave Marika a Dark Moon Greatsword. So that's pretty huge. The God Queen herself, who holds the Elden Ring and life and its balance, the founder of the Golden Order, the Eternal Queen, knows about all this stuff. That's very interesting. Anyway, more about Radagon. Radagon is Marika, but they do have different characteristics from each other. You know, there is a uniqueness between the two sides of this one whole person. Radagon at the time may not have known that everything Marika knew, but Marika totally knows everything that Radagon's up to. One thing about Radagon is he was a delicate craftsman with excellent needlework. He came from the capital with this golden needle and thread and his own craftsman tools so he could create clothing, demigod clothing, actually. The children that him and Rennala would have, he sewed all of their clothing. He was a very caring father. He made us preceptors swear an oath of secrecy. Oops, I guess I didn't follow that rule too closely. But, you know, as someone who is Marika, you would have your own secret side. One thing very interesting is that when he made us don those masks, it was the lattice stitching over the mouth, his lattice. But our cloaks were supposed to be fashioned with a snake brooch. We'll talk about them later, but the snake is seen as an enemy of the Erd Tree. So it was very interesting that Radagon, who is Marika, purposely wants to marry the Full Moon Queen, and then uses symbolism of the Erd Tree's enemy to put on his closest confidants. That's very interesting. Every giant is red of hair, and people said that Radagon hated his red hair. You know, me personally, you know, I knew him. I don't really think he hated his red hair. People said he did, but Radagon, he was proud, and he did things for a reason, and he wore his red hair in the open for everyone to see. I don't think he was ashamed of who he was. He strived to be complete. He was a prolific reader and learner. He wanted to know everything there could be known. He wanted to know everything about the past, and he wanted to try and predict the future. And he wanted to be a complete, whole person, but I don't think he hated his red hair. You know, it was part of him, and I think he was proud for who he was. He was also a friend to the beasts. He brought with him a few red wolves. A red wolf used to live in the debate parlor where we are now, but beasts are smart. Wolves especially, they're intelligent. They communicate with each other. There used to be beast men who had their own civilizations and rituals and culture and language. So he was friends with the beasts. They were allied together, and wherever you see a red wolf, you should think Radagon wants that wolf there. There's also a rumored connection tied to the Misbegotten. I'm not sure who came up with that rumor. Some say that these red-haired Leonian Misbegottens are maybe his children, or he's one of them. I don't know who came up with those rumors, but I've seen the guy. He does not look like a Misbegotten. Maybe there's a connection, some way, maybe with the red hair or something or other, but, you know, come on, guys, a Misbegotten? Come on. Maybe. I don't know. Guy's got a lot of secrets. He could be anything. He taught his lattice connection, lattice technique, as a way of protection and connecting. The lattice is crisscrosses. If you kind of peer over the gates and look at how the gate is locked at Raya Lucaria, that is actually Radagon's lattice. You'll see it in his statues. There's a lattice in his statues holding his back. And that is a way to, I think it's to signify protection. It's also a way to signify connection, connecting two things together, connecting with thread. And it's also, I think it's symbolic for a type of gardening technique where you would build a lattice in a garden so you can have vines wrap up it. After he, eventually divorced Rennala, he would found Golden Order fundamentalism. Now, I myself am not a Golden Order fundamentalist, but I respect the teachings, and I respect the advancements in mathematics and history, and just understanding that Golden Order fundamentalism allows us So I use them in my techniques as well when trying to understand lore and history. He would delve deep into the Golden Order to try and learn the truth of things, and that's where we get the law of causality and the law of regression, because of Radagon's great work as a prolific reader who wished to be complete. And one thing about him is that you can find his statues literally everywhere. This guy, for a guy who's unknown, he got around. He's got statues in the Church of House. He's got statues in the Church of Manicelis. He's got statues on every single Divine Tower. He's got statues erected in the Chapel of Anticipation. He's got statues erected in the Forbidden Lands. And he's got statues erected down in Noxtella, which is very weird. Some people will say, well, that's not Radagon. It doesn't, Guys, the statue is a man holding a book and holding a sword. That's Radagon, okay? He's a champion, he can fight, and he also knows sorceries and incantations. That's Radagon. And it's very weird that Radagon, who is Marika, has statues in Noxtella where the Nox are, who tried to craft their own lord using mimic tears. So it's very weird that those things are there. I'm not trying to say anything about the guy, but, he probably just didn't pop out of nowhere, since he is Marika. It's very confusing talking about Radagon. It's very confusing. But hey, that's who he is. He's a confusing guy. Radagon America would have, Radagon and Rennala. Oof. Don't tell Rennala I said that. It's fine. She gets it. She knows who he is. Rennala knows that Radagon is America. She knows, guys. They were husband and wife, and they had 4 children together. Radagon had his secrets, but I don't think he kept them from someone who he cared about immensely. They would have 4 children. They'd have, and you probably know all their names, I don't have to say them, but Praedar Rykard, General Radon, the Luna Princess Rani, and Blythe, the half-wolf. Now, Blythe is a stepbrother to the Carian children, but he was raised as one of Rennala's own. She, took him in, and the way, since he was, I'll talk more about them later, but he was considered one of her children. He was shown the same love and respect. Rykard, and you might have heard my other familiar talk. That's Luther. He comes from Sarash's line of beasts. He's very regal and much like a lion. Anyway, the first 2 children they'd have would be Rykard and Radon. They're much older than Rani. I'm not sure if they're older than Blythe, because, Blythe, I don't know when he was born, but sorry for that interruption, students. My familiar Luther walked over my Glintstone staff's cord and caused issues. Anyway, I think I was talking about Blythe. I don't know what his age is. I don't know when he was born. I don't know if I said this, if it got caught, so I'll just repeat it, that they were all instructed by royal preceptors, such as myself, in all sorts of things, in history, in lore, in magic, in mathematics, in art, and, in combat with the knights. They are a very smart and learned group of children. They're also later considered demigod stepchildren, after Radagon would leave and marry Marika. But, Radagon is Marika, so they were demigods the whole time. And one thing that's interesting about a demigod, now don't ask me how I know this. The Black Swordsman has given me some information. But each demigod born from Marika is Radagon, are granted a great rune at birth. And we know that siblings have very similar looking great runes. Now, the Black Swordsman has been able to tell me what Radon and Rykard's great runes look like. And we know that they look almost identical. They have different unique features based on who they were as people and their personalities and what happened to them in life, but they look the same in the general shape. Based on other information we have, we can deduce that great runes are something that is inherited by the children of Marika. But that being said, these are probably the best bunch of kids you could ask for. They were really great. People change. in their lives. You know, they might not do, you know, what's best later down the line, but, you know, when they were kids, you know, what can I say? For the sons, it was tough for them, though. Growing up, it's tough being a son in a matriarchal culture. You know, there isn't, you know, they are afforded, you know, every advanced, what's the word I'm looking for? They're afforded any, gosh, the word slips my mind, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's just, they were born to royalty. Everything in the world is at their fingertips, but it's still tough, you know, being a son, where, you know, I bet some women, you know what it's like, you know, being a woman in maybe a patriarchal society, but in Carian culture, it's matriarchal, so it was kind of in the inverse, and the sons kind of felt a little, not outcasted, but, you know, that there was a ceiling, a glass ceiling of sort, and how far they could make their accomplishments being men. Our first children of champions, the child of champions that we're going to look at, is Rykard. Now, Rykard, he was always my favorite. Since birth, though, he was afflicted with some sort of sickness. You may have seen paintings of him. His face doesn't have it kind of like shedding, like a melting sort of sickness. It affected his confidence. It made him very stern, this affliction that he had. Unamusing. He never really laughed as a kid, but he was smart, he was shrewd, and he was cunning. You know, he was, even as a kid, nothing got past him. He was on it. He was also very close with his brother Radagon. You know, Radagon loved him like no other, and Rykard loved his brother. He didn't really show it outwardly, but in his own solemn way, he loved his brother, you know, like it was his other half. He also had very great respect for his father Radagon. He, you know, even so, when he really took over Volcano Manor and had his own knights of his employ, the red plume on the knight's helmet was to show that respect and love he had for his father. He loved his mother, you know, he did, but his father was someone to look up to. He was a man of learnedness and a champion. He was a man of strength and wisdom, and he looked up to him as someone, as, you know, you can be strong and wise, and sometimes wisdom is stronger than great strength. Later in his life, he became an official for Landel, and for his demeanor, he was sent to do grim tasks. He was stationed at the Volcano Manor in Mount Gelmir. Now, before the shattering of the Elden Ring, the volcano wasn't active, so it was more hospitable then. There was towns, and there was this giant manor inside of this inactive volcano. And his goal there was to investigate heretics. The culture on Mount Gelmir, it looks a little different now after the shattering, but it was the ancestral home to worshippers of this immortal serpent. In ancient times, there was said to be this giant god-devouring serpent. And I think it even was probably originated either in Mount Gelmir or even the mountaintops. But it was part of this larger ancient pagan belief system that used to exist before the age of the Erd Tree. And it seems that one of the deities was this immortal serpent. They would perform these sacrificial rituals for the serpent's favor, where they would offer up blood and someone's life for the serpent. They fashioned these weapons to look like a serpent's head, so when they would cleave down onto a person's neck, it would look as if the serpent was devouring the person whole. And that was, you know, to them, the blood sacrifice was supposed to gain good favor with the serpent. They had this assassin's group called the Formless Serpents. I don't know who the exact enemies were to the Formless Serpents, but they were a concern for Landel, and that was one of the reasons why Rykard was sent to Volcano Manor to investigate these Formless Serpents. The worship of this serpent was considered blasphemous in the Age of the Erd Tree. The serpent is seen as an enemy to the Erd Tree. There is some iconography of the serpent coiling around the tree to take it of its life, which is why it's weird that the preceptors had a serpent brooch beneath their masks. Most gladiators, if you were able to get to a coliseum and see a gladiatorial combat show, most of the combatants were adorned with snakes, because the snake was the enemy of the Erd tree. It was a way to, propagandize to the people who your enemy is. In these bloodbaths, they had snake shields and snake weapons. It's kind of weird. I don't know if the gladiators themselves were serpent worshippers, but they were made to seem as such. If you've ever been to Dominula, which is the windmill village, you may have seen their Festival of Flowers. Now, the Dominula village those inhabitants used to live in Mount Gelmir, but after the Shattering, migrations happened, and now they're in the windmill village. But their festives are flowers and dancing, and it looks very beautiful. But really, it is a serpentine, an ancient serpent festivity where they sacrifice the sons and the males of their towns to the formless, or to the great serpent, to this immortal serpent. So, it looks all fun and games, but guys, if you're looking for a date, don't go to the Festival of Flowers, because you will not be happy. They will take your skin and they will turn it into clothes, and then they will take your bones and turn them into sickles and rakes. So you could find a girlfriend somewhere else. Don't go to Dominula if you're looking for a date, unless you're sapphic. If you're like that, then probably you might find someone nice there. They're not very pretty there though, so I would recommend somewhere else. When Rykard was Lord of Volcano Manor, he was close to the Shaded Castle Castellians, House Murray. And Shaded Castle is not very far from Mount Gelmir. It's kind of between Mount Gelmir and Leyendell. So it's a good go-between between whoever's stationed at the Volcano Manor and the royal capital. So he became, good friends with the Castellians at House Murray, or the Castellians, the Shaded Castle House Murray. While he was there, the House Murray invited a dancer from Eocad. Sorry if I don't pronounce it right. Eocad is a foreign land, and they're famous for their dancing women's and their dancing swords. Their rusted red blades are enchanted with some sort of magic where they could throw the sword away and bring it back. And their women would dance with these castanets, and they would do this dignified, beautiful, and passionate dance. It wasn't a seductive dance. It wasn't sexual in nature, but it had this beauty to it that was alluring. So while Rykard was visiting at the Shaded Castle with House Murray, he became infatuated with this dancer from Eocad, and so much so that he took her as his consort, which was it was kind of out of the realm of this child of noble birth from the Carians to take this foreign woman, this of a foreign culture, and of a dancer of all things, and I don't know if he married her, but definitely had those types of relations with her. And she pushed him. Rykard was investigating the heretics, but she wanted him to learn from the heretics. And that pushed him to rediscover the ancient hexes of Mount Gelmir, these magma hexes, these they were sorceries that didn't just use intelligence to be cast, but you had to have faith within the occult, within the serpent, within these pagan beliefs to be able to take the power of the volcano for yourselves. I think Tanith saw the ambition that Rykard had, and she ignited it. This son of a matriarchal clan with this shedding sickness on his face, she saw within him a fire that needed to be lit, the volcano within him that needed to erupt, and she pushed him to do that. The thing is, though, it's that there is a certain arrogance when you attempt to harness the fury of the volcano, and whether the volcano is Mount Gelmir or that volcano is Rykard, she was arrogant to do so, We'll talk more on what happened to Rykard later, but, I don't think it was the right thing for her to do. The next son we have from Caria was Radagon. He was... he had this beautiful, giant red mane of hair, just like his father. And he was much larger than his siblings, and everyone else for that matter. Even as a kid, he was big. Like, he was like 2 years old, and he was 4'8". Like, he was huge. If you may have seen him. You could probably see him from the top of the Raya Lucaria tower all the way in Caelid. He was big, and he was always passionate and ferocious and laughing. His personality was as big as he was, and he showed that. He had a deep. He loved his brother Rykard so much. His brother was meek and quiet. Not timid, but stern. And, Radagon would see his brother from, after practicing in the yard with the knights, he'd see his brother walking with a preceptor and books and scrolls in his hand, and he would drop what he was doing and go immediately, give him a big bear hug. He loved his brother. He really did. He also loved the songs and the stories of the Lord of the Battlefield. Godfrey was one of his idols. What was that song? It was like, hark, hark, all who hear Lord Godfrey's come to tear you a new rear. I don't know what it was. It was kind of very bawdy, but he loved those songs. And he wanted to be like Godfrey. He wanted to be his own Lord of the Battlefield. But he was still a proud son of Radagon. He loved that his father was a champion himself. So he had this idol of the Lord of the Battlefield, but he also had his own, we have our own champion at home, son. And, he had a great respect for his father as well. His father, Godfrey was his idol, but Radagon was who Radagon looked up to. He wanted to be as big as Godfrey's legend, but he wanted to stay true and be like his father, Radagon. He was also he was a frequent visitor of the Colosseums. Even as a kid, he was, he wanted to, at any of the Colosseums, he wanted to go and he wanted to see the bloodbath. He loved the sport of violence for the sport of it. He loved honorable combat, dishonorable combat, just fighting. That was his thing. At one point, he started outgrowing his already large horse, Leonard, and that would lead to something kind of special. So there was, amongst the knights, there was one Carian knight. His name was Oka, and he came from Celia. Celia is known for, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but they were known for these vanishing sorceries. And Oga's, at the time when he was a Carian knight, his nickname was the Hidden Comet. Because his trick is he wouldn't use a shield. He only used a catalyst and his sword, and he'd use his catalyst to make his sword invisible. So when you were dueling with Oka in the yard, the Hidden Comet himself, you were always in a defensive stance because you didn't know where his blade was going to come from. And he was a very stern and he was a very thoughtful knight. He was very focused on, the stoic nature of being a knight, that violence isn't to be taken lightly. So, he didn't dislike Radagon, but he wanted to teach Radagon how to be more, more focused. He thought Radagon was a little reckless. So he challenged Radagon to a duel. The Hidden Comet said, I'm gonna teach you a lesson. He wasn't trying to kill him. It wasn't it wasn't like to end his life, but it was to just, humiliate him a little to, teach him some respect. So they get in the yard, and so the Hidden Comet, he hides, he's known for hiding his sword. And Radagon comes to the yard, and he has no weapons in his hand. And, Oga says, I thought we were coming to duel. Why have you come empty-handed? And Radagon says, Sir Knight, you come empty-handed to every fight. And so with that, Oka enchants his weapon. It becomes invisible. Radagon is barehanded. Oka goes for an overhead attack. And Radagon is so quick, he grabs him by the wrists, and he stops the attack and plucks the invisible sword from his hand. And he looks at Olga in the face, and he says, "If you want to catch a comet, all you have to do is grab it by its tail." And from then on, Olga had the most immense respect for young Radagon. He saw him as not just a great fighter, but someone who was intelligent, someone who was respectful, someone who was thoughtful. You know, he was always laughing and he was always loud, but just because he was like that didn't mean that on the inside he wasn't, you know, contemplative and looking ahead. And because of that, he thought it would have been appropriate to take Radagon and make him study sorcery as abroad. The hidden comet he would take off that moniker. He would retire. Oh. That was my cat falling. I mean, my familiar falling. So the hidden comet, he would retire as a Carian knight, and he would travel with Radagon back to his home of Celia. He knew of someone who could teach him some gravitational magic to help him ride his struggling horse. He gained so much respect from him that they went together, Radagon and Olga. So Celia was a town of sorcery. They are descendants of the Eternal. That makes these Necronian Nox. They're a secretive culture. We don't know too much about what they really believed. They seem to worship the moon, thanks to this craftsman, this katana craftsman, who constructed the moon veil and its signature attack, the transient moonlight. So we know that they worship the moon in some way. They also had an interest in stars, you know, being Nox and all that, as many of them went to learn Glintstone stars at the Academy and then returned back to Celia, bringing their knowledge with them. So there was the moon and stars. There's also, in Celia, there is an Erd Tree Knight statue constructed there next to a Noxian throne, or maybe it's an eternal throne, next to one of those throne coffins. You know the ones I'm talking about. And it's very curious to why those are next to each other. Now, being that they're a secretive culture and they have their Mirage Tower in Altus, either that statue is there as a way of they were conquered by the Erd Tree capital, and that had to be constructed there, or they constructed themselves because they were falling for the Erd Tree, and you know now they're really Erd Tree worshippers. But it doesn't really seem like they were Erd Tree worshippers. It seemed like that was either the invading force constructed that statue, or that statue was constructed as a way to prevent an invading force from annihilating the town, saying, "Hey, no, we believe in your guys' religious beliefs," but you know, deep under, you know, and you'll see why we believe that, because they were expert assassins who hunted their fellows. They hunted other sorcerers. They had their Mirage Rise in Altus, and they had the Unseen Blade and Unseen Form spells that could make the caster almost completely invisible, as well as their weapon completely invisible. You know, this is where Olga, when he was the Hidden Common, where he learned that technique. It was also the home of an Alabaster Lord, which are the blue and white beings of stone who were risen to life when a meteor hit the lands between. Not to be confused with the golden-hued Onyx Lords and their destructive outward powers. The Alabaster Lords knew the power of pull. There was also memories of eternal darkness in Celia. If you remember when we were talking about the destroyed eternal cities, we talked about this eternal darkness and how it looks like where Onyx Lords summon meteors out of. Found from what the Black Swordsman has told me from being in Celia, he found the Eternal Darkness spell, a scroll of it, in a prison cell guarded by a Bloodhound Knight. So it seems that the Eternal Darkness spell and anything related to it is a forbidden sorcery to the Celians, and they are enemies to it, since it looks like the meteors that come out of how the Onyx Lord summons meteors, and that there was an Alabaster Lord living in Celia. You know, I have reason to believe, and that there was an Onyx Lord in prison in Caria Manor, that the Alabaster Lords are aligned with the beings of silver like the Nox, and the Carians like moi, and the Onyx Lords are the enemies. With this, Radagon and Olga both became students of the Alabaster Lord, and together they learned gravitational magic, the power of pull. Radagon learning this would allow him to conquer the stars. The child of the moon would be the conqueror of the stars. This is known as the Star Surge conflict. In Sellia, there was fears of falling star beasts or worse. That expert katana craftsman I was talking about who made Moonveil, he also made a meteoric ore blade, and that was specifically designed for dispatching life that was born from falling stars. When we think about falling stars, could they be random or could someone summon them? And if someone would summon them, who would it be? Our first guess is an Onyx Lord might want to summon a falling star based on their meteorite spells, but who's allied with the Onyx Lords? What goal would you get for summoning a falling star onto Sellia or into Caelid? Nevertheless, these falling stars were assailing Sellia, and Radagon alone stood up to the might of these stars, and he crushed them. Not only did he crush them, he sealed the fate to the stars. With the pull, he pulled them in close and stood them there in stasis. This was the birth of the Star Scourge. Radagon would be known as the Scourge of the Stars. Which some people say that, well, since he's controlling the stars now, since they're stopped in stasis, Radagon must have had a rogue streak and he went against the family, but that's not the case. Radagon is a child of the moon. His mother is queen of the full moon and an adherent to the dark moon. So the stars being controlled by someone in the Carian line, someone in the moon, that's kind of poetic. It's the moon leading the stars. The stars don't move without the moon say so. So I don't see this as Radagon rebelling against the family or rebelling against the culture. No, I think it's in line with the culture. This is the moon controlling the stars. This feat of stopping the stars would impress many men to join under Radagon's banner. This act made him a heroic legend. He wanted to be like Godfrey. He wanted songs written about him. He wanted people to fight in his honor, and that's exactly what happened. Being able to hold the very stars in place, and his large physique, he was a legend was born that day, and he was happy. he came home to Caria Manor. And there was this, we were hosting this eccentric knight. His name's Jaren. He's a very weird character. And when Radagon comes into the feast hall, Jaren is sitting at the table. He's speaking with Rennala. He's speaking with the queen. It's a very, this is like, you have to be as respectful as possible when you're speaking to the queen. But when Radagon gets into the hall, Jaren jumps up on the table and he looks Radagon in the face and he says a toast to the Scourge of the Stars. And Radagon fell in love with this guy. He said, "I want you to be my first commander." Radagon didn't have an army yet, but he knew he was going to have one. And Jaren became his guest commander, his first commander, and it was amazing. His first knight was Olga. This Carian knight who kind of didn't look down on him, but wanted to teach him respect and to lead Radagon was now following him. And many other knights and soldiers wanted to join him. Radagon would only choose the strongest and most passionate fighters. He wanted people who fought for the respect of combat. He didn't want people looking for a payday. He didn't want people looking to be a nuisance to small folk. He wanted people who would fight for what was just and fight with strength. War, there's nothing good in war. But he wasn't looking for people who were greedy. He wasn't looking for people who wanted to make a name for themselves or to steal Radagon's thunder. He just wanted people who respected strength and prowess and were passionate. Most of their fighting was in Caelid, because, this was a peaceful time, but Caelid was known for dragons and large beasts, so there was dragon and beast hunts. Slaying a dragon, becoming a dragon slayer is a title of its own. So, that's the type of fighting and training they would do, fighting dragons out in Caelid, when Caelid was a beautiful, lush wildlands. And they would also kind of fashion fire into some of their techniques. Now, fire is seen as a heretical weapon against the Erd tree. I mean, fire burns trees, but out in Caelid, no one really cares what you're doing. It's like the backwaters, so they would use that to match their pride and loyalty to Radon, their burning passion to fighting with him. They also mimicked the King of Beasts, Sarash. Radon, he idolized Godfrey, and he idolized the imagery of Godfrey, the golden lion. So they would use that bestial fighting, the flipping, and you may have seen the lion's claw technique, where front flip forward with a giant greatsword. So they would mimic that fighting style, and in doing so, their name would become the Redmanes, the red hair of Radon, of Radagon, but mane as in a lion, as in, mimicking the King of Beasts and Godfrey. So the two passions would be combined into creating one of the greatest military forces that the world has ever seen. Just a bunch of passionate, strong fighters who were training on dragons and giant beasts under the Scourge himself. And our next child is Lunar Princess Ranni, the sole heir of Caria. She was special. Ranni was special. She was much younger than her brothers. It was, a miracle when she was born. Carians are matriarchal, so the heir has to be a woman. So the day that Ranni was born was a huge celebration for all of Caria. Every night, every retainer, the brothers, Radagon, and mostly Rennala, she loved all of her children, but she prized Ranni. She was her world was Ranni. Her only daughter was everything to her. And she was the pride of Caria. Everyone loved Ranni. As a kid, she was fierce and playful, and she had this beautiful red hair like her father. She was cute. She was a kid, but she was smart, and she was charismatic, and she was bubbly, and everyone loved her. She was like her mother. She was special. And she would follow all the same Carian traditions in line to becoming queen, just like her mom. Rennala led her to the Dark Moon, and she also led her to the crone, Renna. Now, I never got to see Renna in person, but I know that she was this four-armed being, similar to a Wraithcaller. But she taught Ranni to fear the Dark Moon. I don't know if Renna also taught Rennala, but I know she taught Ranni. I learned all of this later, of course, but she taught her to fear the Dark Moon. Now, the Dark Moon is what the Carians' culture revolves around. The ring is based after the Dark Moon. The husbands are given the Dark Moon greatsword, but she wanted her to fear it, to fear the cold, and the dark, and the loneliness. And I think that was to fear it would to be respected. Don't use this. The Dark Moon is not a toy. It is not something to use willfully and playfully. She was a playful child, but she had to learn that there is things to be afraid of, and there is things to be respected, and the Dark Moon was one of them. The fourth child we have is Blythe. This is Ranni's brother and her shadow. He's the stepbrother to Ranni. Radagon brought him with him when Ranni was born. This was, essentially his gift from his side of the family. He was a half-wolf, so half of it, he had the heart of a hound, but the mind of a man. Which means he was, he could speak and talk, and he had 5 digits on his hands, grab. But he was a loyal brother and friend. He was always playing with Ranni. Wherever you saw Ranni, Blythe would be behind her, like her shadow. He would not be seen without her, and he loved her to no end. Rennala loved her daughter like her world, but Blythe may have loved her even more than her own mother loved her. He was like a dog in that way. No matter what you could do, no matter what she could do to him, Blythe would always love Ranni. And him and Ronnie and the blacksmith, E.G., the big troll, that guy. He's kind of stern and he's a bookish guy, but he was playing with Ronnie and E.G., or Ronnie and Blythe when they were kids. Blythe is he's a little boorish and a little blunt. He's kind of straight to the point, and he's not the smartest guy, but he's good. He's good. They say that beasts are drawn to champions, and he was drawn to Ronnie, so, there is a case to be made that, he saw a champion within Ronnie. One thing about him, though, is he hated the cold. He hated cold nights, he hated the snow, but no matter what, he still stuck by Ronnie. But something changed with Ronnie. We all saw this change within her. At the time, we didn't know what it was, but she changed when she learned the truth. And the truth was that she was an Empyrean. Her mother, Rennala, has Noxian Numen heritage in her line, and her father, Radagon, is Marika. He's full Numen. So their first daughter, or their daughter, had a chance of becoming an Empyrean because of this union, and that's what she was. I don't know how she learned it, how she learned she was an Empyrean. It could have been Blythe. Blythes are shadows to Empyreans, so it seems like this is why Radagon gave Blythe to Ronnie. They say that they're crafted, the two fingers craft these wolves or these shadows for Empyreans. But he wasn't crafted. He's of living flesh and blood. He was probably trained by the fingers to enact something, if something would go awry. But they didn't poof him into thin air. He's a living thing. He's born of someone, and he's a half wolf, half man. We know that Marika's half brother was Malekith, her shadow. He's a full beast, and Blythe is Ronnie's step brother. So it's possible that Malekith could be Blythe's father, and Marika could be Blythe's mother. I don't know. That could be the case, but, we don't know his parentage. But we know that he had some training or some manipulation or whatever to, to shape him as a shadow for this Empyrean. I don't know who taught her this, but I don't think Rennala knew. I don't know if Rennala knew she was an Empyrean. I don't know if that's something she was in the know on. Excuse me. But Ronnie would defy her faith. She would defy her fate. She didn't want anyone to control her. She wanted the control over her own life. If she was going to do anything, it was because she wanted to be so. And her allies would too. Blythe would do whatever she wanted. E.G. would follow behind her. The snake Celevis, he even followed behind her. The great dragon Adula, the Glintstone sorcerer devourer himself, Ronnie bested the dragon, and he became a retainer for her. So Ronnie, she saw it as the moon guides the stars, not the other way around. If anything, her fate was her own, not for someone else to dictate. Long live Ronnie, cold and fearsome Dark Moon Witch. To learn how to sever her Empyrean fate, something, I don't know how exactly she learned this, but she learned of the rituals of the eclipse. Now, if you remember before, we talked about the sun realm and how the moon and the sun would make allies, and that when you put the moon and sun together, you get an eclipse. Well, apparently there was this ritual that if the moon would swallow the sun in an eclipse, it could ward away destined death. Destined death is the rune from the Elden Ring that can dictate when demigods die. So when the moon would swallow the sun, it would ward away destined death. And she learned that if to perform this eclipse ritual, that if two demigods perished at the exact same time, she could slay her own flesh and her soul would still be alive. her thoughts and her essence would still remain. And she could transfer her soul into a doll and continue to follow on her own dark path. Now, this is a very complicated set of circumstances need to happen for that to occur, and I don't know who taught her this. Who could have known that if you killed two demigods at the same time, one would perish in flesh and one would perish in soul, and she could put her soul into a doll? I don't know who could have taught her that one. I don't think she figured it out on her own. But she would follow this, and her vassals would too. Preceptor Jackivus, Blythe, and Eg. Eg was a little worried. As a troll, he had his stomach excised of the face of the one-eyed god during the War of the Giants, and he was fearful of the Greater Will's ire, so he fashioned a mirror helm that was similar to a Nox's mirror helm to ward away the Greater Will and its vassals. He was a little superstitious and a little afraid, which, thinking about what they wanted to do, I don't see why not. So this is some speculation, but I think there was a price for this information. And I think that price was, from what I've learned of the Black Swordsman, what he's told me about his time in the Lands Between, is that when he gained Torrent, the spectral steed, Ranni appeared to him, disguised, giving him a false name, and said that Torrent's former master wanted him to have this spirit calling bell. Now, I think that that was the price for learning how to do the Eclipse ritual. If you give the next person who owns my horse this bell, I will teach you how to preserve your soul and slay your flesh. So that's just some speculation on my part, why that could be the case. She also let her personal knight, Loretta, out of her service. Loretta was this phenomenal knight. She had this sickle and this teardrop shield. Her favorite weapon was a bow, though. She was always seen horseback. But she would release her knight from her service. I think she knew something about Loretta, a secret about her. And she knew that Loretta wanted to do find her own path. So Loretta would leave to find a new home for her and for Alban Works as well. But she wouldn't leave completely. A spectral projection of her can sometimes manifest within the Carian Manor in need of protecting the inhabitants. So she still was loyal to the Carians, even though she did left. And I think it was because Ranni released her from service. I don't know. I wasn't there. So what was this Eclipse ritual? Well, you may have known it as the Night of the Black Knives. Ranni worked with her brother Rykard to steal a piece of Malekith's claw and a fragment of the Rune of Death. Malekith had the Rune of Death engraved into his black blade, and I think some of that essence got onto him and part of this blasphemous claw that she was able to retrieve. She gifted this claw afterwards, after the ritual was performed, in case Malekith came after Rykard, and he would need to fight off the death of the demigods themselves. Rykard was busy in Mount Gelmir learning about the heretics, so he made a natural ally for this Knight of the Black Knives. She also hired these assassins. They were Numens who were close to Marika. I don't know what their main goal was, but they were close to Marika. And she imbued their knives with death via this ritual, this ritual she learned. And their blades would turn gangly and long and spiked, but the Rune of Death would be imbued inside of it. And what they were supposed to do, what the Black Knives were set out to do, was to perform this curse mark ritual on Godwyn the Golden, the sun. If you aren't sure of what I'm talking about, please read my Eclipse scroll, my Eclipse video, specifically Chapter 4, to learn how Godwyn is the Golden Sun. They were to create a full curse mark in a circle on his back to make him a martyr for destined death. But Ranni had different plans. She knew of the Eclipse ritual. So she betrayed the Black Knife Assassins, and she had a curse mark. It's really hard to talk about because, what comes next is it's really sad. It is sad, but, it's history, and I have to teach it. She would have a curse mark engraved on her back, but because she did it at the same time as Godwyn, it wouldn't be a complete curse mark. It would break in two. So 2 children would die that night. One would die in flesh alone, and the other would die in spirit. So afterwards, Ranni's soul would be secretly placed into this doll. This doll was fashioned to look like Rennala, the crone who taught her to fear the dark moon. And Godwyn, with his soul dying and his flesh still living, he would be born as the Prince of Death. He would later be buried into the roots of the Erd Tree as is customary, as Erd Tree burial is customary. But in doing so, it would allow the death in his body to spread into the roots of the Erd Tree, and Deathroot would sprout throughout the lands between. The Deathroot prevented souls from entering back into the roots of the Erd Tree, and instead they would find the bodies of the already deceased. These roots would pop out of the ground and bring with it the skeleton remains of mostly Sunrealm adherents, and they would come back to life as those who live in death. So we now have a world where the undead are roaming, and the undead are bandits, they're criminals, and they're also the soldiers from the previous ruling power's military army walking around the lands. Like, that's, imagine, you conquer a nation, and then who knows how long later, but the soldiers that you killed hundreds of years ago are popping out of the ground to get their revenge. This would lead to Godfrey being banished by Marika in the capital. Godfrey would not be the Elden Lord anymore. This is what's known as the Long March of the Tarnish. The gold of grace was removed from their eyes, and Marika sent them out to go to foreign lands and to die. And don't ask me how I know this, but I've heard some things. The goal was for them to leave the lands between, war, create their own civilizations, their own cultures, their own cities, their own religions, go war and die, grow stronger in the face of death, and then one day return post-death back to the lands between. It's a very interesting scheme that she had going on there, but that's what happened. And with that, Radagon would be recalled back to the capital to become the second Elden Lord. But Radagon is Marika, so she essentially was making herself the Lord. She, this guy whose statues are found in Noxtella is now going to be the Lord, the Elden Lord, the husband to the queen who houses the Elden Ring, but is also the queen who has the Elden Ring. So she essentially became her own Elden Lord in this turn of events. But this would lead to the downfall of Caria. Some people say that, Radagon leaving Rennala is what really broke her heart, but that's not what did it. The death of Lunar Princess Ranni broke Rennala's heart. This was her only daughter. This was the pride of Caria. We all, at the time, I didn't know. It broke every single one of us to know that something had happened to the precious daughter of Rennala. And I can't imagine what she felt. I can't imagine what a mother could feel. I'm sorry. This isn't acting. I'm actually crying. I can't imagine. I'm serious. This isn't, I'm not actually doing a bit. I am. It is really sad thinking, how a mother could feel.
would they lose their child. So, what happened to Rennala, it's not because her husband left her. It's her child died. And, it wasn't just because Ronnie was the heir to the Carians. It was because it was her daughter, And it's sad. Okay. I'm sorry, I need to drink water. Oh, Jesus. Jesus was a tarnished. He formed his own religion. Anyway. Anyway, this is the type of history and lore that you come to this channel for. You're coming for Jackivus Mimicous. Jack is a mimic. So, Radagon needed to return to Leyndell. Ronnie is, gone. Rennala, she's heartbroken. Radagon gifts her with this amber egg, and inside the amber egg is the Great Rune of the Unborn, plucked from the Elden Ring itself, placed into this amber egg. I don't know where this amber came from. It could have been amber from the Erd Tree. Excuse me. Or it could have been amber from the Halic Tree. But we don't know where this amber came from. But inside was the Great Rune of the Unborn. He would also cast Golden Barrier onto her. This was, the spell that was used in the first Liurnia War to protect the Champions of Gold from the Glintstone magic. Knowing that things could come to blows with the Academy, Radagon did all he could to protect Rennala in his absence. He needed to return to the capital, but he did not want any harm to come to Rennala. So the Carians prepared for the Academy's betrayal. If you remember Carian Retaliation, that was developed for this particular moment. We knew that our time in Raya Lucaria would not last forever, and we needed to do everything we can to keep Rennala safe. And the rapacious cuckoos, they would attempt to depose the Carians. Rykard was in Mount Gelmir. Radon was in Caelid. They were far away, attending to their own matters after the Night of the Black Knives. So it was just us knights and Rennala, and Radagon had to leave. So with Radagon's departures, these cuckoos, they were this army hired by and paid for by the Academy. They were given magic grease and glintstone bombs, faux magic, if you will, and they were paid and sent to depose the Carians. They were attempting to assassinate the Carians. Unfortunately for them, though, they would get ensnared in a magical trap, and those who died were turned into puppets to fight against the rest of them. So the cuckoos should not have done what they did, because look where it got them. But Rennala would be holed up, thanks to Moongrim, safely in her chambers, and she would succumb to this sleep of rebirth. In an attempt to bring her daughter back, she kept rebirthing these juvenile scholars over and over and over again, attempting to bring her daughter back to life. These children were short-lived. Their legs didn't work, very similar to an Albinorix's legs. Rennala eventually would also begin the rebirthing process. She would maintain her youth through rebirth, but she would also lose her mind to it. Rebirth is like a sleep. It's an oblivion, if you will. You lose yourself to it. And Rennala, she's not the woman who she once was when she took the Academy, when she descended from the mountaintops, when she had her children. But she's still the last queen of Caria to me. With Godfrey expelled from the capital and the Deathroot spreading through the Great Tree root system, the Age of Abundance had come to an end. The Age of the Erd Tree, Godfrey's age, had come to an end. The Erd Tree ceased producing its magical dew and sap that was granting this invigorating power to those who imbibed in the sacramental rituals. It in turn turned into this just a more of a religious symbol. No longer could it actually bestow strength onto the adherents, But it could just be seen as something to worship, to have faith in. With Radagon as Elden Lord, this brought about an age of enlightenment. No longer could they just, be willfully ignorant on the root of their golden order. They had to understand it. Gladiatorial combat also died out. It used to be that the dead gladiators' bodies would be put into these jars known as warrior jars and planted near Erd tree roots to cultivate them more. But with the spreading of Deathroot and the prevention of Erd tree burials, the Colosseums soon died out in favor, and just root burials as a whole went on the downslope. People couldn't die, they couldn't get to So when the Golden Order was founded, the Rune of Death was plucked from the Elden Ring. So for people to die, they had to be given a root burial. They had to have their body and their soul absorbed into the Erd tree's roots. This would in turn allow the Erd tree to produce the dew and the sap, and it would invigorate it. So the Rune of Death is removed from the Elden Ring. Then Deathroot is created with the Prince of Death being embedded in the roots, preventing souls from going back into the Erd tree. So so people cannot die now. There used to be their death was because they could be given an Erd tree burial. So now you just have these mad guys walking around who can't die. Everyone's got this eternal life, and it frickin' sucks. And excuse my language. And this is where we get Golden Order fundamentalism, because Radagon was trying to learn the regression, the causality. How did we get here? What caused all the events to come to this? And that would lead Golden Order fundamentalism, causality and regression would lead to the Shattering. The Shattering was, as you know, not just the war, but the Elden Ring itself would be shattered. This is, I have a little outside information, thanks to the Black Swordsman. And from what he's told me, Marika shattered the Elden Ring, and Radagon repaired the Elden Ring. He believes that it wasn't Radagon in opposition to Marika, but working with Marika. If she were to shatter the Elden Ring completely, the entirety of the lands between would just be swallowed by the sea. It would be catastrophic for all life. So in order to not completely destroy it, Radagon needed to repair it as well. They were working together in that way. Much like a blacksmith would melt down a sword so he could reforge it to something new. But we didn't know this. At the time, the lands between is just, it's changing. The volcano becomes active again. The land starts splitting. There's jagged rocks coming out of the ground. It's nightmarish. It's hellish. And Marika and Radagon go missing. No one knows where they are. The world is looks like it's falling apart. People can't die. And the God Queen and her king are gone. And the Erd tree shakes. It shakes this violent shake, and golden seeds start flying from the Erd tree. And where they land, these spectral plants, these little tiny Erd trees start popping up. And eventually they turn into these minor Erd trees. It was like the Erd tree was saying that life itself had ceased to exist, that it was over, that life was over. But that's only life for the Erd tree, I guess, because a seed means you could plant more. And it kind of makes you think, if the shattering of the Elden Ring could produce golden seeds to spread from the Erd tree, was this the first time that it had happened? You keep a seed in your pocket and you plant it for later, who knows how long. It's just a thought. So after the Elden Ring is shattered, the demigods, their great runes that they were bestowed with, they inherited at birth, it starts receiving this newfound power. And this mad taint of power kind of makes them a little stir crazy. Ranni, when she shed her Empyrean flesh, she also shed her great rune with it. So she wasn't really affected by the changes of the Elden Ring shattering and, causing this type of madness to occur within them. It essentially, I think, pulled out whatever trait they had, whoever they were was just amplified, that just, your personality times 100. when the Elden Ring shattered. There was a succession crisis in the capital. We'll get to what that succession crisis is, but with Radagon America missing, a new king has to be. The Elden Lord is gone, the Queen is gone, so a new king has to take the place, and a succession crisis happens there. Raya Lucaria locks its doors. The Academy did not want to take part in anything that was going to happen. So they used the Lattice spell taught by Radagon to close their gates. Anyone who was locked outside, you lucky few were safe inside this academy, but anyone else who was stuck out there when the Elden Ring was shattered, they're still out there, fending off for themselves. And with the Elden Ring shattering, the Tarnished began returning to the Lands Between. Now, the Tarnished had left the Lands Between. They had had their own cultures, they had their own wars, and most of them had died. The Grace of Gold gave them new life, and some of them would just appear in the Lands Between. A chapel was constructed near Stormvale. The chapel was anticipating new Tarnished. A Finger Maiden would be there waiting a new Tarnished to, when you're a Tarnished and you come back to life, I'm not too sure if this is for all the cases, but your memory's foggy. You were dead. So you don't really know that much about your previous life. You might know some things, but you might not know everything. So these Finger Maidens were left there to indoctrinate these new Tarnished into this religion. And what they wanted is they wanted a Tarnished to become Elden Lord, that they had this prophecy that a Tarnished would return after death and become the Elden Lord. And we started seeing these Tarnished coming back. Some Tarnished didn't die and come back through grace. They took a boat to come to the Lands Between. Many of them didn't make it, but some did. Usually expatriated nobles were sent to go find the Lands Between. But most Tarnished who came to the Lands Between right after the Shattering came to after they died. Some of them would tread the path of Elden Lord. Some of them would fight in the Shattering War. Some of them would follow the Two Fingers. Others would follow the dragons. Some chose new masters altogether, and some went their own way. Most were guided by grace. And there was a lot of them. With the Shattering, Rykard became the Lord of Blasphemy. He would not squabble to the Erd Tree any longer. He had been with Tanith, investigating these heretics and learning from them, learning about their serpent culture. And he would raise against the Erd Tree. He saw these Tarnished fighting to become Elden Lord, following this path, and he thought it was all a farce. So he did what was tantamount to blasphemy. He started destroying the new minor Erd Trees that were growing near Mount Gelmir, near Volcano Manor. There's actually one that, I don't know how he did it, but he was able to get rot pests beneath the Erd Tree to poison the roots to kill the tree above. He constructed these thing called abductor virgins, and he would begin abducting people. He wanted to know where his father had went. Radagon had gone missing with the shattering of the Elden Ring, and he did whatever he could to find out, what happened to my father? Where is he? So he resort to abductions and tortured. He would torture many people to gain information. It was very cruel and barbaric, and he wasn't, he was different than the kid that I know. He wasn't like that. I think Tanith pushed him closer to the serpent that was inside of him. He would also muster aid from knights who were loyal to him. He would muster aid from some beasts, like wolves and some red wolves. And he would also gain allyship with the fire monks. He was able to get the fire monks down from the mountaintops, at least a few of them, and to come to his aid. But he would not participate in this Shattering War, at least outright. So he took defensive measures on Mount Gelmir while he was gaining information from these abducted common people and nobles that he would torture. But he did gain control somehow of the formless serpents, and he would send them to assist his brother Radagon. Because Radagon was enraged when he learned that his father Radagon was missing. This, with the shattering of the Elden Ring, the great rune inside of him, it burned in this like fiery passion of anger that his father, who he loved and respected and looked up to, would go missing. So the Radon, the Star Scourge, would muster his Redmanes, and they would march north. They were already using fire arts, mostly for show, but he would fashion them for the sole purpose to fight the Erdtree forces. His brother Rykard sent him Formless Serpents. He sent him some Fire Monks and some Abductor Virgins to assist him in their conquest against the capital. The Veiled Monarch, as he was called, would face the wrath of the sons of Radagon. Before Radon marched on Leyndell, there was actually another a war going on in Leyndell. The first defense of Leyndell, that it's called. There was a succession crisis. So the Veiled Monarch, his name was Morgott, and he claimed that he was the true son of Godfrey. No one had heard of this guy before. No one had seen him before. And he was claiming that I am the son, the true son of the first Elden Lord, and I am rightful king. Now, the heir at the time was believed to be Godfrey the Golden. He was like, you may have heard of his brother Godric. He was not, they were no blood of the lion. They may have had golden in their name, but there was no way they were really part of the golden lineage, So, especially since to prove that Godfroy, so he could prove that he was really the son of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord and the leader of the Long March and one of the first Tarnished, he started grafting Tarnished to his body. He would cut their limbs and attach them to himself. So he could prove, look at me, I'm Tarnished too, just like my ancestor Godfrey. His younger brother, Godric the Golden, he would escape the capital, hiding amongst the women folk, and eventually make it to Stormvale Castle and hold up there. But Godfroy would he resorted to grafting. He was all grafted up, and he had banished and exiled knights from the Sun Realm backing him. He hired sellswords, Caden sellswords, and he had some loyal bannermen who, envisioned the time of Godfrey and when he was the Elden Lord, the beast in the tree. And so these people who, were nostalgic for an older age, they would muster around Godfroy and create what was known as the Golden Army. The Erdtree army was, it was stupid for Godfroy to attempt to take Leyndell. They couldn't even get past the first barricades. The Erdtree army had Dragon Knights. These were knights from after the war against the dragons who grew part of the Dragon Cult. They had the Erdtree Sentinels, this ancient pact of horsebound knights with their golden vows. They had the Misbegotten and Omen slaves. And then they also started perfumers. With the Erdtree ceasing its due in its sap production, perfuming became a large art within the capital to try and mimic the glory days of imbibing on dew and sap. They would create these concoctions that soldiers could imbibe on, and it would invigorate their power. They also would try and ease the pain of misbegottens and omens. They were kind of like doctors in that way. And eventually, the first defense of Leyndell would end in the capture of Godfrey the Grafted, as he was called. He was really Godfrey the Golden, but, he was grafting, so he got the nickname Godfrey the Grafted, and he was captured and put inside of an Everjail. So his body was slain, but his soul would have to live forever in an Everjail. And I think the Dragon Knight who captured him, Kristoff, I think he was given Erdtree burial, but since Deathroot had been going on, his ashes would be unreturned to the roots, and he would not be able to really get the Erdtree burial. So after the first defense, this is when Radagon strikes. The Redmanes, or this is when Radon strikes, the second defense of Leyndell, the Sons of Radagon. The Redmanes would attack in the name of Radagon. Under Radon's banners, they would fight for the second Elden Lord. The Erdtree forces would start imbibing on perfumer tonics, as I mentioned before. These could increase their blood fervor. This could increase their passion. This could increase their defenses. And the Redmanes would fight with fire and blood. Their swords would be covered in flame, and their goal was to, cut down everything in their path. King Morgott actually had the perfumers fashion chemical weapons. These giant spears catapulted from outside the city that would land into the ground and spray this kind of intoxicating mist in order to, eliminate the enemies. It was gruesome and it was gross and it was cowardice, but it's something he did. But Radagon, he would push through that, and they almost captured the second gate. Radagon and the Redmanes would almost break into the capital, but then something insane happened. Coming up from the rear, this, I don't know what, this creature called Margit, the Fell Omen, and his Night Killers were on these black funeral steeds, were cleaving through the rear and knocking down every soldier in their wake, knights, champions, whoever, cut down by this Fell Omen and his Night Killers. Radagon was caught off guard, and the Fell Omen leaped up onto him and stabbed him squarely into the chest. This would, Radagon is a big guy, and he got bigger with the Shattering. So, no one thought anyone could defeat him, but here we are. He's knocked down, and it's... Whoa. One moment. You may have heard a bird. 1 second. I'm sorry, I'm back, everyone. I had to take care of that little bird chirp you heard. Anyway, the Fell Omen was stacking corpses on high, and Radagon would need to retreat back to Caelid. The attack was a failure. He almost had the second gate, but after that attack from the Fell Omen and the destruction of many of his champions and knights, he had to retreat back to his home in Caelid. He faced no resistance on his march south, however. The Cuckoos would not fight the Redmanes. Godric hid in his castle in Stormvale. He would not fight the Redmanes. So it was a smooth march of recovery back to Caelid and back to Redmane Castle. What's interesting, though, is that while Radagon was retreating, not too far behind was Malenia, the Blade of Mikola, and her clean-wrought knights. They were on his tail and marching behind him. No one knows the true reason for her chase, why she was coming after Radagon, but, her and her knights, this Valkyrie as she was coming after him. It doesn't seem that she was allied with Morgott, the Veiled Monarch, but, for whatever reason, the Blade of Mikola was coming to fight Radagon, the Star Scourge, and the Red Lion. Up in Volcano Manor, we have what I like to call the Den of Vipers. Because Rykard would form an alliance with the Godskin nobles, the ancient Godskin nobles, betraying the Fire Monks. So the Fire Monks are monks who worship the Flame of Ruin in the Forge of the Giants, but some of them were seduced by the god-slaying Black Flame. It makes sense for Rykard to want to ally with the god-slaying, the Black Flame god-slaying Godskin nobles. Say that 3 times fast. Because he would not war with the demigods. He wanted to war with the gods themselves. I'm not talking about he wants to go to war against Malenia and Radagon and Morgott. He wants to go to war against the Greater Will. He wants to go to war with the Formless Mother. He wants to go to war with the God of Death. He wants to go to war with the God of Life or the Frenzied Flame. He wants to go to war with the gods. Okay? He does not... The Shattering is small peas to Rykard. He is ambitious. He wants to go to war with the gods. So, at Tanith's behest, he fed himself, great rune and all, to the god-devouring serpent. If you may recall, we were talking about the culture of Mount Gelmir and how they would worship this immortal serpent. Well, it was immortal for a reason. It's been around. And I guess deep within the recesses of the volcano, after the Elden Ring was shattered and it began to erupt, this serpent, it revealed itself. And Rykard literally fed himself to this serpent. While he was consumed, don't ask me how I know this, but, Preceptor Jackivus Mimicous knows things. He envisioned the world and the gods consumed by the serpent. Afterwards, he would continue these horrid birthing rituals. I believe the woman he did this with was a woman named Datakar, but I could be wrong on that. And this would birth new man serpents. We'll talk a little bit about them in a moment. But his birthing ritual, these new man serpents would come to life. And through all of this, Tanith would not leave his side. So this leads me to believe that this was part of Tanith's doing. She wanted this to happen. So let's talk about the culture of serpents. And when I say culture of serpents, I don't mean the people just dancing around on mountaintops with flowers on their hair. I'm talking about the man serpents. These man serpents were born after the elder serpent devoured a demigod. Rykard started birthing new man serpents. It's very weird to say that. But he may have not been the first demigod to be devoured. Need I remind you, Marika is the eternal queen. Malekith is known as death to the demigods. And it may be that in the distant past, a past that we can't even envision, maybe the ancient dynasty or the Blackstone civilization with their automatons and their golems, maybe they had demigods of their own, and maybe the immortal serpent devoured one of them and birthed these man serpents. The man serpents are made of partially of volcanic stone. If you were to ever, the Black Swordsman has told me that if you were to hit one with your blade, chunks of rock would come from them. And they were also able to dwell within the lava. So much like a dragon breathes fire, I guess a serpent lives in magma. They also crafted these ornate weapons, and this is how we know that the man serpents existed long before Rykard, because they have these ornate weapons made with gold and red gems, and the hilts are made of magma. No human could be able to make these weapons. These are man serpent weapons. They dwell in the lava. So it leads us to believe that they had this long-standing culture, especially since these are religious creatures. Their sorceries, these ancient hexes, draw on faith to be cast, not just intelligence. You still need to, the man serpents are smart. They are intelligent, but they also are faith-based. They worship, I think the name of the immortal serpent, his name is Eagle-Eye. And in ritualistic practice, they would worship the shedding of the skin, the devouring of the world, and so these man serpents probably existed long before any contemporary recording of history, way back in the distant ancient past. I couldn't say when, but based on the evidence that we have, actually, if you go, if you've ever seen a finger creeper, hand like spiders, those are actually Rykard. Well, not right. They're not always, but most of them are Rykard's hands. When a snake sheds its skin, it sheds everything, but they also shed body parts too to grow larger. The hands fall off. And in the mountaintops of the giants, if you can believe me, they have giant finger creeper hands. So it leads me to believe that in ancient times, ancient, I'm talking way back, if you've ever seen the giant skeletons coming out of Caelid or out of the mountaintops, there must have been an immortal serpent who was devouring so much that their hands will grow that huge. And way ancient times, before I couldn't even tell you how ancient, when they had to use, when Glintstone was on floppy disks, that's how ancient we're talking. So those are the man serpents. We also have his allies with the Godskin Apostles. They were rebels without a queen. So all of the apostles are serpentine in physiology. Some of them can elongate like a snake. Some of them have tails. So this assimilation makes them similar to the Crucible, when all life was blended together, the Erdtree and primordial form. So the Godskins, the Godskin Apostles are similar in that way to the Crucible. Amongst the apostles are the nobles. These are the most ancient apostles. So we believe that they must have existed way during the Crucible era, is when you could find nobles, or when they were, those apostles came around. We also know that they were once servants to destined death. So at one point, these apostles were servants to destined death, the rune of destined death. I don't know in what capacity, maybe in a religious capacity, maybe they worked for Malekith, maybe it was before Malekith, who knows how long it was. One moment. But it was, They used to serve destined death, but one day, this Empyrean, chosen by the Fingers, would embrace the Apostles. She's known as the Glomide Queen. We don't know much about the Glomide Queen, but we know that she was an Empyrean. She was chosen by the Fingers, and she would channel this black god-slaying flame through her spiral sword. I believe that since she's Empyrean, she has to be a Numen. So maybe she could be related to Marika. She could be Marika's sister, maybe Marika's mother, maybe Marika's cousin, maybe Marika's second cousin twice removed on her father's side. Or maybe she's, this is kind of crazy, but the Glomide Queen might be Marika herself. Who knows, but we know that she was an Empyrean chosen by the Fingers, and she channeled this black god-slaying flame. This black god-slaying flame, it mimicked destined death. And it had that coloration, kind of that silver tear mimic color. So it's very interesting. We don't know where God-slaying black flame comes from, but it's very interesting that it mimics destined death. So the Glomide Queen, she controlled the apostles, and she would swaddle newborn apostles in this godskin cloth. I don't know if godskin is made from Numens, if it's made from demigods, if it's made from actual gods, but she would swaddle them in this cloth when they were born. And she would lead them in these godskin hunts until she was defeated by Malekith. Now, Malekith's name used to mean death of the demigods. So that makes me wonder, were apostles demigods? Was Malekith killing the Glomide Queen's children, and that made him the death to the demigods? Does that make the Glomide Queen Marika? I don't know. I don't know. You tell me, student. Write. Your homework is to tell me who's the Glomide Queen. 'Cause I don't know. And if you say it's Melina, I don't know. Don't be more creative with that. That's your homework. Or don't, I don't care. Anyway, I'm a professional preceptor. Let me get back to history and lore. The Godskins would make natural allies with Rykard. He wants to devour the gods, they want to hunt the gods, peas in a pod. They didn't have their queen anymore, so follow the snake guy. They got snake tails anyway, so it makes sense. He would also, with the Tarnished returning, he invited Tarnished to the Volcano Manor as recusants to hunt their fellow Tarnished. He wished to be an enemy of all who wanted to become Elden Lord. So Tarnished were given letters of invitation and then letters of assassination to pick out other Tarnished. They would go after Tarnished who were two-finger assassins, Tarnished who were just assisting other Tarnished. They would go after Tarnished who were attempting to mount the Forge of the Giants to become Lord, or Tarnished who were trying to follow the path of the dragon. Whoever it was, they were looking to take them down. And then champions among them would join him as family, as Rykard would call it. And that would be, you would be given audience with Rykard, but what family was is consuming these champions. So flushed with runes and power, he thought he could put them together within the bowels of the serpent as a family, and they could devour the very gods. It's kind of like how the Flame of Frenzy adherents believe that they could melt everything down and make it one again. Rykard was similar in that way. Their spirits would, would look similar to the ancient death hexes, but it would be wreathed in fire and rage and regret. Blasphemy only leads to a miserable death. I don't care if you hate the Erd Tree, but the things that Rykard was doing, he wasn't like how I used to know him. A quick note on red wolves. You might think it's weird to talk about red wolves at this time, but it's something important. So we know they're a symbol to Red Hair Radagon. They can cast sorceries and incantation, and they're known to be his close allies in combat. You could find them in Raya Lucaria, Caria Manor, the Moonlight Altar, and the Consecrated Snowfield. But you can also find one in Mount Gelmir, in the Hero's Grave. And he is guarding a chest. This is, the Black Swordsman told me this. That's how I know this. I don't go there myself. He was guarding a chest with Deathroot inside of it. Now, to me, when I hear that, why does this Red Wolf of Radagon have a chest of Deathroot near this burial grounds in Mount Gelmir, where Rykard is? To me, I see Radagon and Rykard using Radagon's wolves, maybe an allyship with Radagon, to propagate Deathroot throughout the lands between. Deathroot seems to be in Rykard's interest. It prevents the Erd Tree from producing sap because Soulskin in there, and Radagon is Marika, and Marika seems to not like the Erd Tree either. Based on, some things that we know about her, that, burning it and such, that's not in this class, but, we know. Yeah, come on, we know. If you know, you know. So, it seems like Rykard and Radagon might have had a little ins between them and the wolves. Note on Mount Gelmir's hero grave is that there are Bloodhound Knights in there. There's Bloodhound Knights found in Volcano Manor, and there's wolves guarding the hero's grave. So it seems like the beasts are the enemies of the Erd Tree as well, based on this information. But that's just some notes I want to throw as an aside. We want to be thorough here in this class. So as long as it is, I got to give you all the information that we can. So Rykard is he's this Lord of Blasphemy. He has these recusants. He's mustering up an army and he's feeding himself to the serpents. So this gets Leyendell nervous. And it would lead to the bloodiest and most horrific battle of the Shattering. The Veiled Monarch Morgott would advance troops to attempt to take Volcano Manor. Now, that's a stupid thing to do to begin with, because Volcano Manor it's by its natural shape has defensive. It's defensively favored. It's on a It's slanted. You have to advance vertically. It's got narrow corridors. It has lava. It's not smart for an army to attempt to take Volcano Manor on Mount Gelmir. But advanced forms of weaponry were used. With Golden Order fundamentalism, there came a huge explosion in mechanical weaponry, pulley crossbows, pulley regular bows, jar cannons. The advancements in mathematics led to these new weapons of war that, a single man could shoot 3 bolts of crossbow at the same time in rapid succession, or one man could shoot an explosive great bolt from a distance far away. So we saw violence, death, and destruction like no other. No longer were we just fighting with swords, but also the abductor virgins would be fashioned into weapons of war. These would be autonomous weapons that could shred and kill and maim any who stand in their wake. And no victors would be found on the assault on Volcano Manor. Only despair and madness would be found on both sides. Eventually, Rykard's own knights would leave him. If they saw, if this is the price of blasphemy, I don't want to pay it. And, a few of them, I think, they searched for this ancient weapon from the old times. This, God Serpent Slayer sword. I don't know what it's called. But it's this, apparently, that when taken to the Great Serpent, a beam of light would come out of the blade in order to slay the immortal serpent. So they even burned the insignia on their crests to show that they would not follow the Lord of Blasphemy anymore. So that's Volcano Manor. What's going on in Caelid? Radahn gathered his strength in Caelid. The loss at the second defensive Leyendell was an embarrassment for him. He'd never lost before. But while he was trying to recover so he could try and, take a second attempt at the capital, Melania, the Blade of Miquella, arrived with her Cleanrot Knights for war. And, Radahn would never back down for a fight. So he knew not why she came there, but he would take her on. And the greatest battle of the Shattering commenced. You have the Redmanes, the fiercest, strongest warriors in the land. And then you have the Cleanrot Knights. These are knights who were... Their armor was made of unalloyed gold of Miquella, but their bodies were enwreathed with scarlet rot. So they were this dichotomy of abundance and rot together as a single warrior. So you had the greatest, natural men of the battlefield fighting these almost like superhuman beings of rotting and regrowth all at once. So, Radahn and Melania clashed swords, and Melania could not beat Radahn. Radahn is a great swordsman. He has gravitational magic. He has Carian magic. He's a giant among men. So what does she do? Well, to meet her measure, she takes out this needle. It was a gift, I think, from her brother, Mikola, this unalloyed gold needle. And it was supposed to ward away the scarlet rot, and she snaps it. This allowed the scarlet rot to flower and blossom within her. This would explode into the scarlet Aeonia. Caelid would become a wasteland of rot and decay. Life there would change. It wouldn't end. Life doesn't end with rot. It just changes. But the landscape would be completely decimated. And the scarlet rot would infect Radagon. It would drive him to madness. Luckily for him, though, the fire inside of him, the fire inside of his great rune, was burning with this fiery passion. This fiery passion like the red hair of the fire giants, and would protect him from the scarlet rot. He would still lose his mind, but he would not decay. Malenia would succumb to the rot herself and start losing her memories and losing her fatigue, and I think this clean rot knight named Finlay would carry her and bring her back to Mikola's Halig tree to recover. The Redmanes, still in, they still loved Radagon. No matter what happened around them, they still fought for him, and they thought the only thing that they could do is they did not pursue Malenia after her defeat. What they did was remained and fought the rot with fire. Still to this day, you can, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you went to Caelid, you would find Redmane knights, fire and blades, the weaponry from the fire monks attempting to stave off and burn the rot. The rotting of Caelid the dragons who live there would migrate north towards the Dragon Barrow, towards the Bestial Sanctum and the Divine Tower of Caelid. They would migrate north away from the Scarlet Rot, and that area would be known as the Dragon Barrow. I think the Mother of Dragons, Grail, herself actually is succumbing to the rot. So we probably aren't going to see this at the end of dragons, as it were, within the world. But all things come to an end. So where does that leave us? Well, before the Black Swordsman arrived, the Black Swordsman is the last, you know who he is. He's the last Tarnish to arrive in the Lands Between. The Lands Between are shattered and broken. The Deathless and the Mad are its inhabitants, and they wander the Lands Between. Radagon is still missing. Rennala was continuing to do her rebirth rituals. Rykard and his recusants were out hunting the Tarnished, and Radagon was wandering the wastes like a mad dog, feeding on corpses. And because of that, the stars were still locked in stasis. Radagon is powerful, he's strong. But because he stopped the stars in the Star Scourge conflict, once his madness took him, he couldn't let go. So because of his madness, they're locked. There's no way of returning the stars from being locked in stasis unless he's, killed. But, one good thing came out of the Shattering, and that was the return of Ranni. She returned the body of a doll to weave her knight into being. So even though Caria had fallen, even though Radagon was turned into a mad dog, even though Rykard turned to blasphemy, Ranni was still the hope of Caria. But that's before the Black Swordsman. What about after him? So after the Black Swordsman arrives, I obviously meet him. He tells me much about his journeys. He sends me things to research. Rennala no longer has her great rune of the Unborn. Now, I wasn't too keen on how he treated her initially, but, he didn't know any better. But he plucks the great rune from the Amber Egg, and Rennala no longer continues rebirth rituals for any and all. She can give rebirth rituals to the Black Swordsman if he has a larval tear on him, which is quite odd that a man who isn't a mimic can do rebirth. But that's just that. He would eventually find the God Slayer Serpent, or the Serpent Slaying Sword, and slay Rykard, finishing the Volcano Manor. No more tortures, no more recusants, no more Path of Champions. Rykard would be, dead. It's sad that it had to come to it, but, it just had to. The Radagon Festival took place. Jaren had this he had this agreement with Radon that if, no matter what, they would die in combat, and they would make sure it happened for the other fellow. So Jaren held this festivity, and the Black Swordsman was there, and the Radon's festival success, even though Radon was driven to madness, he was still able to go down fighting like a warrior. And in doing such, the stars were set in motion again. And because of that, the Black Swordsman was able to help Ranni follow her dark path as an Empyrean. So may the Black Swordsman weave her night into being. Long live Ranni, the dark and fearsome witch. Oh, what is that? Oh my god, students, look outside. The Erd Tree. It's burning. This is it. The Age of Stars is upon us. Don't fail us, Ranni. Don't fail us, Black Swordsman. Class dismissed.
Hey guys, Jack again. Hope you all enjoyed that video. It was a long one, and we covered a lot of information. Some of it is embellished, and some of it's, made up just to kind of make it fun. But, I think I tried to do a good job of painting the personalities of these characters with the little information that we have. Like Ogha, there's no information in game that would say that he was really a Carian knight who brought Radon to Sellia. But, I just thought it was a fun way to kind of, show what I think these personalities of these characters are. I don't make it any secret that I'm a big George R.R. Martin fan, and that his work, writing A Song of Ice and Fire, a show Game of Thrones, and his Thousand Worlds series is, hugely influential on me and how I view Elden Ring, because, he wrote the lore in the world before Miyazaki took over. And we see some of those parallels between A Song of Ice and Fire and Elden Ring. One of the examples is Rykard and Tanith is very similar to Stannis Baratheon and Melisandre, the Red Woman. A foreign woman with a foreign religion who pushes this stern and once noble man into blasphemous acts of burning people alive and destroying the old religious iconography and, going down the path of blasphemy. These are two sets of characters that we've seen between both Song of Ice and Fire and Elden Ring. So I kind of tried to draw lore from that understanding. And speaking on that, it's kind of interesting that if you've watched any of my previous videos, I've talked about how House Murray is tied to Mikola, and I think he may be the founder of House Murray. It's very interesting that the castanets are found at the Shaded Castle where maybe this Mikola influence is happening. Maybe he wanted this serpent thing to go on. But yeah, we laughed, we cried, and I talked for like 3.5 hours. So, if you're curious to the writing process for this video, I took every single item, description, and dialogue in the game, and I organized it based on which character I thought they were related to. I based it off of 18 main characters or major characters, I thought. And then I broke it down to just the characters who were related to the Carians, and then I tried to put them in what I thought the chronological order could be. And then eventually I made the PowerPoint slides that you saw. So there was no script. Everything that I was reading was off of those slides found in the corner. So if you're curious to where I was drawing information from, the image of the item on the PowerPoint slide, or the line I wrote on there, or just from my head, you kind of have to decipher what is the headcanon I presented to you and what's the actual lore. But, there was a lot of information there. So if you wanted to, comment on something, please leave a timestamp, because I don't remember everything I said. I said a lot of stuff. And as I said in the intermission, we're going to be, doing a new series that is focused on the ideas and the stuff from like you guys, I'm no special than you. I just have a iPhone camera and a Blue Yeti microphone, and I edit on a MacBook, so that doesn't make my ideas better than your ideas. So I want to do something to kind of like give back and give a voice to the voiceless. I'm a man of the people and all that. I may not agree with the theories that you present, but someone might. And if one person hears you, and the whole world hears you. So thank you guys for watching. If you're still awake, great. Catch you in the next one. See ya.